You know, here at the Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program. Our book today is How to Get Rid of a President by David Priess. And this is from the chapter Rejected by the Party, starting on page 12, kind of mid-chapter. Presidents need not be thrown out at the polls on election day to find themselves dislodged from the White House. History shows us that a chief executive's own political allies can remove that incumbent when they perceive him as unpopular or unfit. Refusing to nominate a president for a second term, or better yet, getting the incumbent to realize that he should walk away before it becomes an embarrassing vote at the convention, does bring the party significant pain. But many politicians have calculated that discarding their own party's toxic president by internal action is better than waiting for the voters to do it. This dynamic remained absent for the first half-century or so of American politics. George Washington, who didn't represent any formal party, set a precedent by stepping away from re-election after 2 terms. Successor after successor followed suit, keeping the support of their parties until they left office after 8 years. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Jackson lost the next election, both Adamses and Van Buren, or met the Grim Reaper, Harrison. John Tyler, if only in this one respect, was a trendsetter. He began a 6-president cascade of men who failed to appear on their party's ballot in the general election after their first term. One, Zachary Taylor, literally had no choice. Like Harrison, he died in office. The others, by staying alive through their 4-year terms, could have carried their party's banners again on Election Day. Not one did, as national agonizing over slavery and other tensions within each of the major parties made it difficult for any president to build and sustain a governing coalition. Of those 5 chief executives, only James Polk left with a solid reputation and a ledger of successes. He'd told Democrats upon his nomination in 1844, "I shall enter upon the discharge of the high and solemn duties of the office with the settled purpose of not being a candidate for re-election." And he stayed true to his word. It was just as well. Only 3 months after what would have been his second inauguration, he died at the age of 53. The 3 presidents who followed Polk, the forgettable series of Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan, shared 3 characteristics. First, historians routinely rank them among the nation's worst presidents. Second, and related to that, they took no responsibility for resolving the national moral failure of slavery. And third, no matter how they had attained office, they, like future presidents Chester Arthur and Lyndon Johnson, found themselves spurned by their own parties. The Whigs had learned in 1840 that a celebrity candidate seemed to have an easier route into the White House than a party regular. So in 1848, they nominated General Zachary Taylor, a recent hero of battlefields in the Mexican-American War. Despite his lack of solid political principles or any apparent passion for the job, just 2 years earlier, he'd said with apparent sincerity, "I am not and never shall be an aspirant for that honor." Taylor won the election over Democratic candidate Lewis Cass. In July 1850, he became the second straight Whig general to president who couldn't make it to the next election alive. Vice President Millard Fillmore took his place. Fillmore had risen to prominence in New York's anti-Mason party dedicated to exposing and opposing Freemason fraternal organizations, but switched allegiance to the Whigs in the 1830s. In the first year and a half of the administration, inter-party rivals had manipulated Taylor better than Fillmore did, leaving him little to do but preside over the Senate and stew over his fate in a useless job. But as president, he was prepared to avenge perceived slights. Ahead of their expected dismissal, all the cabinet members whom Fillard had inherited from Taylor offered their resignations, which were quickly accepted by the new president. He asked them to remain in place for 1 month. They agreed to stay for 1 week. Fillmore would proceed to fire more previous political appointees than any of his successors had. More than half of those at the State Department, for example, had to find new jobs. The biggest development during Fillmore's presidency was the Compromise of 1850. This set of bills admitted California to the Union as a free state, allowed the organization of the Utah and New Mexico territories without reference to slavery, resolved both the Texas state boundary and the Lone Star State's remaining debt, abolished the slave trade in the District of Columbia, and reaffirmed the fugitive slave law that required the returning of slaves escaped across state lines. Fillmore signed each bill, believing this package of measures had fixed what he considered an annoying issue that kept getting in the way of his other priorities. The compromise bills delayed a war between the states, but at a cost. They not only perpetuated slavery, but split the Whigs further apart, as most Northerners refused to abide by the fugitive slave law. Congressional elections in November 1850 increased the Democratic opposition's majorities in both the House and the Senate. The rest of the president's term was so bad that the highlight might have been the start of Commodore Matthew Perry's voyage to Japan to open that country to American trade, even though he didn't arrive until Fillmore left office. Not long after rising to become the chief executive, Fillmore declared he wouldn't run again in the 1852 election. He reiterated that in 1851. But the trappings of presidential power and the pleas of his remaining party faithful convinced him to retract that pledge and make a late entry into the field of candidates. He portrayed his about face as a noble personal sacrifice for the good of the party and the country. And during the spring of that election year, 8 Whig state conventions endorsed him. As delegates gathered for what a leading historian of the era calls the longest, most rancorous, and most debilitating Whig National Convention ever to meet, the first tally had Fillmore in the lead. How to get rid of a president.
Want to connect with the show online? You
Greetings,
can find
my
the Thom Hartmann
friends,
Program
patriots,
on Facebook,
lovers of
Twitter,
democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We were brainstorming new names for the weekdays the other day, just, because it's the Trump era, right? So it'd be martial law Monday, toxic Tuesday, worst case scenario Wednesday, thought controlled Thursdays, and effed up Fridays. I don't know. We're gonna call it Anything Goes Friday today. And so, whatever topics are on your mind, we can have a conversation about. Harvey K is going to drop by in our second hour. Today is the, I believe, 70th anniversary. No, it's got to be more than that. 75th anniversary. Thank you, Sean. Of Franklin Roosevelt rolling out his 5 freedoms speech, his second Bill of Rights, his new Bill of Rights, which includes, it's amazing to think about this, 75 years ago today, the President of the United States said that education for all, including college education, should be a right and not a privilege. Health care for all should be a right and not a privilege. And a job that pays well enough that you can actually raise a family without going into debt should be a right and not a privilege. And that all of these rights should be guaranteed by virtue of government action. And, for 75 years, billionaires and right-wingers have been fighting this tooth and nail, and so far have held it off. There's a number of things in the news, too. I just want to bring you up to date on a few things here, and then we'll pick up your phone calls. A historian from Yale University, Timothy Snyder, this was almost a year ago, back in May of 2017, half a year ago. Timothy Snyder is the author of Black Earth, The Holocaust as History and Warning, Bloodlands, Europe Between Hitler and Stalin, and his new book, On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. He's, as I said, an award-winning historian. And Chauncey DeVega interviewed him for Salon magazine at salon.com. And you can read this. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. He said, this is what this historian, he has watched the rise of populist fascists all around the world and written about them. And he said, we're still at the stage here in the United States where protest is not illegal. We're still at the stage where protest is not lethal. Now think about that for a minute. If you lived in Egypt or Turkey or Brazil, in large chunks of the Middle East, in fact, the vast majority of the Middle East, if you try to protest, you could die. The Philippines, Duterte kills his political opponents, calls them drug users. He goes on to say that you have to accept that there is a time frame. Nobody can be sure how long this particular regime change with Trump will take, but there is a clock, and the clock really is ticking. It's 3 years on the outside, probably a year, before Trump throws or stages a coup and overthrows democracy. Could the state of emergency associated with the wall be something that, something that these guys gamed out in advance, that they planned this, that this is actually part of a plan for a coup? John Favreau, the host of Pod Save America, a former Obama speechwriter, he tweeted out yesterday, he says, "I'm pumped for the next Democratic president to use emergency powers for a Green New Deal to resolve the climate emergency, Medicare for all to resolve the public health emergency." By the way, those two emergencies are actually killing people. And the new Voting Rights Act, a democracy emergency. Interesting. I guess that's making lemonade out of lemons, but, do you think? William Barr, this is a BFD. William Barr is the gentleman that Donald Trump wants to make his Attorney General. William Barr was Attorney General once before. He was Attorney General during the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. George H.W. Bush had been part of the Iran-Contra scandal, and he had a diary, a political diary that documented it. And Lawrence Walsh, who was the independent prosecutor, had subpoenaed that diary from George Herbert Walker Bush, President Bush. He wanted it. And President Bush at that point was like, he was like, "You're not going to get it." And Walsh was going to court. Now, the context in which he was able to subpoena this diary was that he was in the process of prosecuting for actual crimes Caspar Weinberger and 5 other people who were former officials in the Reagan administration. This all goes back to Reagan's deal with the Iranians. You hold the hostages so Jimmy Carter loses the election, and I'll sell you weapons. Walsh at the time said he had, quote, "evidence of a conspiracy among the highest-ranking Reagan administration officials to lie to Congress and the American people." So Barr, who was then the Attorney General, this is the guy Trump wants to make Attorney General, Barr advised George Herbert Walker Bush, the president, to pardon Caspar Weinberger and the other 5 people that Lawrence Walsh was investigating. It would be the equivalent of Trump right now pardoning Manafort and Cohen and, Papadopoulos and just the whole parade of them, right? And once there wasn't anybody left to prosecute, Lawrence Walsh couldn't continue the investigation. He didn't have a hook to hang it on. And he didn't have the evidence he needed to prosecute George H.W. Bush. This is amazing. And Trump now wants to make this guy Attorney General? He's going before Congress next week for his hearings. We'll see if Noah Feldman's piece over at Bloomberg, senators ask William Barr about his pardon strategy, gets much attention paid to it. So there's that. Social Security. This is, and talk about a crisis of democracy. This is the kind of guy that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Social Security Administration. The acting associate commissioner at Social Security, at their Office of Strategic and Digital Communications, a guy named Robert W. Patterson. Before he did this, he was a right-wing talk show host, a commentator. He worked for 2 anti-gay organizations. He advocated for conversion therapy, something that the American Psychological Association calls abuse. And here's the most bizarre one. He was part of this, as being part of this radical anti-abortion group. He was also anti-contraception. This is a guy running Social Security now, or part of the senior management of Social Security now. He said that we should ban condoms because condom use deprives women of the remarkable chemicals in semen, and that semen-exposed women perform better on cognitive tasks. These are the geniuses that Donald Trump has brought into our government. It's amazing. Anyhow, as I said, it's Anything Goes Friday, picking up your calls. Scott in Alameda, California. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I wanted to put a bug in people's ear about Michael Cohen's testimony next month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be in 2 weeks, right? February 7th?
7th?
Yeah.
There needs to be questions put to Michael Cohen about his relationship with Sean Hannity and the Fox News Network.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's talking about questioning about Trump, but Hannity is the untapped gold mine here, and the channels, the fact that Bill Shine and Fox News seems to be running policy here. That would be a no-brainer as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Scott.
And I don't think there's any kind of attorney-client privilege, because Hannity said on air that Cohen did very little for him. It was nothing big, and he's kind of surrendering attorney-client privilege, I think. The other thing is, can I just say this? Mark Warner yesterday or the other night on Rachel Maddow, I think was scandalous. He admitted that they knew nothing about the stuff that came out in the Manafort filing.
That Manafort was sharing polling information with the Russians, you mean?
Yes, they were absolutely clueless about it. This is our representative on the Intelligence Committee in the Senate. They had no clue about it. Why did they have no clue about it? Because I don't think Mark Warner's working hard.
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's that Mueller's keeping his own confidence. He's keeping his mouth shut. And B, any of the Republicans who knew about this were not going to tell a Democrat. I mean, I
think it's scandalous.
Yeah.
I really
okay.
do.
I get it. Your opinion is registered, Scott. I think that this thing is about to explode, and that's why Trump is trying to position himself to have emergency powers. I mean, this may be a whole hell of a lot more Machiavellian than it just looks at first blush. It's 16 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Dr. Tom. Mitch McConnell and 20 other Republican senators will be up for re-election next year.
Yep.
22,
I think, actually.
Sir?
I think it's 22 in total.
Yes, and there are 12 Democrats, here in Alabama, which is Republican. We might even lose Doug Jones. But what I'm thinking about is the fact that when these senators are sworn in, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. And I don't see Mitch McConnell doing his job. And I think he has violated his oath. I don't know if Kentucky has a recall law. Here in Alabama, ours was thrown out and considered and written up as void, and we can't recall a senator. But if this continues on, next week is when these people are going to find out, these poor white Republicans who support Trump, they're going to find out that they're not getting their federal housing checks, they're not getting their SNAP cards, and the school lunch program runs out of money next week. And a lot of people don't understand the school lunch program also provides breakfast for those very poor children. So that means that these people are going to have to come up with the cash to feed their own children.
Yeah.
And when they understand that this is a Republican policy, this was done by the Republicans before Trump took office, and during the first year of Trump's presidency, all of these programs were ended. And so I don't know how these people, like one of my neighbors used to get, she's 85, she used to get $129. Now she's getting $15. And so I don't know how much this is going to affect Trump's base when they realize that all of their federal programs are now gone. And, because I personally, I guess I'm prejudiced, but I look at a lot of these people as being uneducated and ignorant. And so they have been blindly following the Trump banner. And now they're going to find out that these Republican people that they have reelected, including, Tom Cotton is one of them, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, all of these southern Republican states that blindly follow Trump, they're now going to get hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
And people need to make sure that they have someone to put on that ballot next year.
Well, Mitch McConnell is going to be 78 years old when
That's
he's
correct.
running for re-election. And it may well be that he doesn't intend to run again. I mean, his wife is a multi-millionaire, Elaine Chao, who is in Trump's cabinet right now. She, her family owns this shipping dynasty.
Yes,
And
she was born in Taiwan.
yeah. And
so does she still have dual citizenship?
I don't know. But, my point is that I think that it's entirely possible that he's going to simply retire, and that he just won't announce that until the very end, because once he does, he becomes a lame duck and his power is diminished. And Mitch McConnell is all about anything if not power. I'm sorry.
Do you remember our discussion years ago about the definition of treason? And I said that anyone who willingly, knowingly, and deliberately does that which hurts the United States or the people should be charged with treason. And you said we can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're there, Norma.
I think we are too.
I think you were prescient. But and what boggles my mind is how the media is not calling out Mitch McConnell. They just will not call out Republicans. Mitch McConnell could pass the bill that passed the House yesterday, or that had passed the House last week. It would pass in a minute in the Senate. It already passed unanimously on December 19th. He could pass
they're
that.
Up for re-election.
Yeah. Well, see, that's why I think he doesn't care. I don't think he's going to be standing for re-election. But all these other senators, yeah, you're right on, spot on, and we need to hold them to account. Norma, thank you. It's coming up on 21 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. John in Jeffersonville, Ohio. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, I have basically a situation that happened, and then I'd like to, make my conclusion on it, and then I'd like your comments. And I did a deep dive on the Reverend Barber's sermon out of South Carolina, and he was talking about the three reconstructions that we've had in this country, and he goes back into the Rutherford B. Hayes whenever they did the 1877 Compromise, and how they pulled out the troops out of Louisiana and South Carolina in order to let the South do what they wanted again. And then it goes up into the Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. And
yep. That was 1899.
After I did the deep
98.
After I did the deep dive on all that stuff, it just broke my heart. I mean, just to sit here and think about where we're at as a nation and what all, where things are. And basically what the conclusion that I came up to is people who are racist, that we can identify that are racist, we need to just basically not remove them from our life, not communicate with them and not have anything to do with them, and shame them. And that's the only thing I know how to deal with the racism that we're experiencing.
Well, and I agree, John, and I think that the good news, as it were, is that if you look at the popular genres of homemade YouTube videos made with camera phones, phone cameras, is that we went through, first it was the cops killing unarmed black people, mostly men, and then it went to people behaving badly, shouting racist stuff at black people by and large, trying to have a picnic or whatever it may be. And then it moved to, in the more recent version of this, and we've been seeing a lot of these in the last year, is basically white people yelling back at other white people for being racist when they misbehave in public. And so, the genre is evolving, and I think that it's evolving in a way that reflects a broad consensus in America, or at least with, I think, the majority of Americans along the lines of what you just laid out, John, that Americans are saying enough already. Yes, we have racists among us. We are not going to tolerate them anymore. We are going to call them out. You've got even, the guy who's the founder, Gavin McInnes, the guy who's the founder of the Proud Boys now. In his neighborhood, his neighbors have signs up that say hate doesn't live here, and suggesting that it does live in his house. And he and his wife are threatening legal action against them. They're freaking out. They're going around door to door begging people not to do it. I mean, he's saying, "Oh, the Proud Boys is just a fraternal organization. It was just a joke. I'm not even involved with them anymore." I mean, even the big-time racists are being taken down. So I think, John, that we're moving in the right direction, frankly.
it's just heartbreaking that you can hate somebody you don't even know.
Yeah.
For just the color of their skin. It just, to me, it's inexplicable.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
It is breathtaking. John, thanks a lot for the call. Al in Beverly Shores, Indiana. Hey, Al, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I wanted to talk about horses and sparrows. I loved your article. Can we take it back to the Grant administration?
Sure, but let me just, Al, before you continue, let me just tell people what you're talking about, because a lot of people are going, huh? When Ronald Reagan rolled out trickle-down economics, the idea of trickle-down was presented as new and novel, but it actually wasn't. Back in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, as the oligarchs were basically taking over America along with the Industrial Revolution, they started promoting this idea called horse and sparrow economics. And the whole idea was, you know, back in the day when there were a lot of horses, people knew that the sparrows loved to pick the undigested seeds, grain, out of the horse poop that was all over the streets because everybody rode a horse back in 1870. And so what they suggested was that if you feed the horses more oats than they normally need, they will poop more oats, which gives more food for the sparrows, which is going to cause the sparrows to be fat and happy and grow in population. So therefore, we should do the same thing with rich people. Give them more money, and they will then, you know, poop that money on the rest of us. Reagan, it was, you know, pee on us and tell us that it's raining. And, you know, thus we'll all become richer. Back to you, Al.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I also think that Grant got a kind of a bad rap because he just didn't know how to deal with the oligarchs.
Yeah.
Nobody had to deal with them before, and he, you know, it was a brand new situation.
Yeah, this is Ulysses S. Grant, who, as I recall, was elected president in what, 1872, or was it?
No,
74.
it was 1868.
68. Okay.
Because remember, Johnson was impeached.
Oh, that's right.
Over,
yeah.
And then Grant took over as the following president, 1868,
yeah.
And then went 2 terms.
Yeah, then got reelected in 72. Yeah, and Grant also, I mean, if you've read his notes, his biography, and you know, his notes on the Civil War, I mean, he was a brilliant Civil War tactician and you know, military guy, but he was also a severe alcoholic. And that was the problem that really hurt his administration, was that he was drunk most of the time while he was president. And it eventually killed him. I mean, you know, he died, as I recall, of mouth cancer, didn't he?
I don't recall that, but what I do recall is I've read a whole number of anecdotes about his deep moral commitment to the people of America.
Yeah. Well, you just don't know. You know, Al, I'm not a scholar of Ulysses S. Grant, but I have read a good chunk of one biography. but you know, it's fascinating stuff. Al, thanks a lot for the call. I gotta move along here. It's Anything Goes Friday.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back at the other side of the break with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. What's on your mind? Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote, of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, "The market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it," end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest export, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. "I think the game is pretty near up," Washington privately confessed at year's end. "To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it," the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. "Crisis may beget crisis," Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. "But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward," end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Thom Hartmann here with you. Joe in Cupertino, California. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to just throw out real quick that this weekend in my state, at Democrat.com, or I think it's ADEM, is the vote for your positions on the local boards in California. And I think in mine, I just put in the zip code and it told me where to go, what day, what time. Anybody's interested in supporting progressives for, the upcoming election, that's my 2 cents worth on that. But
Cool.
I thought maybe we would have Roe on today, but I guess he's
going to be on Monday.
there. Okay, well, he was really eloquent in quoting Wellstone in this rebuttal to this difference between Mark Pocan, the progressives, and his position along with the other three, where, he just says if you don't believe in something, then you don't see it through. You don't really believe in it. And I thought that was really eloquent.
Yeah.
But I did call to talk about impeachment. And I'm scared because I see a lot of this going on. Everybody's talking about the border and all this. But, I'm reading this article, and I don't want to really go into a lot of detail that Dana Milbank talks about. The time is for the Democrats to be grown-ups and to start the process. There is a very wisdomed congressional representative out of California named Brad Sherman and another gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, and they've already filed. It's House Res 438. And, it just gets the ball in the Judiciary Committee to roll. It gets to the point where, by a year, let's say from now, we are actually taking that vote. Now, you got to start the ball rolling somewhere, but I wanted to just politically weigh this as we're sitting here and the government's shut down. In 1981, I was a Coast Guardsman, and Ronald Reagan did the same thing. I almost lost my car because it was, $165 a month, but there's a lot of people that are being impacted in millions of ways that you can't even imagine. There's no health insurance, like you said, potentially for somebody on cancer treatment. That's terrible.
Yeah.
But if we start this now, I think it may force the House, Mitch McTurtle, to show himself. I mean, he's just standing there behind everybody else, and he's not taking responsibility. If the grounds for impeachment are filed in the House of Representatives, the government continues to be shut down, he's going to have to get with the president, and he's going to have to get with his other Republicans, Lindsey Graham, and say, what are we doing? Because we're going to come for them next. That point where I think if we continue to wait, you told me, or you said the other day, it's like when you take your kid grocery shopping and you don't tell them no. Well, I have two of them. One's in middle school, and if you don't tell them no, they just walk all over you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what Donald Trump is getting set to do, and I think comparing him to a child, the other comparison I made was a dog. If you feed them from the table while you're eating dinner, your life is going to change. and
no one's ever stood up to the guy.
I know, and it's probably in his whole entire life, and it's not just that it's time to stand up to him; it's that he is moving us in a direction which is inconsistent with the democratic ideals of this country. There's just, it's.
Well, yeah, maybe. I was proud to hear Nancy Pelosi say it's un-American to build a wall. That's right. It's un-American.
Yeah. No, it doesn't reflect our values. It absolutely is. It's Soviet. Joe, thanks a lot for the call. Very well said. Jim in Poway, California. Hey, Jim, what's up?
I'm doing good, Tom. Question for you. Are we living through the quote Yogi Berra, it's all over again? In other words, are we living 1984 where Eurasia is our friend and then Pan-Asia is our enemy? And are we seeing the same thing? Is this the White House's plan to keep us distracted?
Yeah, it's deja vu all over again for sure, Jim. This is, 1984. Wow, it's been 25 years or thereabouts since I read it. The last time I read it, I was in Australia, and I was trying to read myself to sleep at night because of the jet lag, and I kept getting these horrible dystopian nightmares from reading 1984. It's a really dark book. And the thought control stuff, I mean, that really started in 1984. It started during the Reagan administration, where they started telling us that, up is down and blue is green, and, on and on. It went on to steroids with the George W. Bush administration, and now we've got it in a big way with the Trump administration. There's a little bit of Animal Farm going on, too, here, if you want to use, Orwell metaphors. But we've got to bring this country back. We've got to restore sanity, and we've got to restore democracy, and we've got to strip some of the powers out, particularly the war-making powers that have just been handed on a plate to the president, particularly since 9/11. Although presidents have been abusing these powers ever since Harry Truman did in Korea in 1951. So this is serious stuff, and I would say to any young person, if you want to understand, the importance, the consequences, the prophecy of George Orwell, read 1984. Jim, I got to run along, but thank you for the call. Sabrina in McKinney, Texas. Hey, Sabrina, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
I want to get your opinion about what I'm thinking. There's this talk about this wall and that kind of thing. I honestly believe there's more to it than what they're telling us. We've got a high deficit and the old trillions of dollars. And I'm thinking that, I don't even know if they can even pay those federal workers. I work in an insurance industry. A lot of folks call us because they've had benefits with their jobs, and all of a sudden they don't. Mm-hmm. And they have to call us so that we can sell them benefits, and they have to pay for their own benefits. They think it's only happening to them, but we're getting these calls from everywhere, and it's happening in a lot of places. So I think slowly but surely they're pulling the rug from under us. And Trump is the host for the 1%, and Trump is carrying out their mission. And he's got the tax thing done, that tax deal done. So, and I don't have a clue about why he's so adamant about this wall when most of the people in America don't want it. And so I'm thinking there's more to it than that, why he wants so much money and it's not going to be enough money, So, I'm sick of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, because they've been
Sabrina, I think the Democrats are waking up and making a comeback. I am hopeful about the Democratic Party. Yes, we've for the last, basically since the Reagan administration, the Democrats have been just rolling over and going along, which is really unfortunate. But I think that we're seeing some changes. But that said, to your question of what is the end game here? Why is Donald Trump willing to go to the wall for the wall, go to the mat for the wall? I think the answer is that he wants to declare a state of emergency, and he needed to create a crisis around which he could have a state of emergency. And, it's not a false flag operation. It's just a totally phony flag operation. And once he declares an emergency, I think he thinks he's going to, and he may well, then have powers that could prevent him from being prosecuted or prevent his family members from being prosecuted. I mean, that's where I think this is going. We'll see. We'll see. Sabrina, thank you for the call. Well said. Ed in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Remember years ago when I pointed out to you that when the United States is in a state of emergency, the president can suspend the Constitution?
Yeah.
You at the time, you thought that was unimportant. Do you still think it's unimportant?
No, I think it's very important, Ed. I really do. There was never a time during the Obama presidency when I thought Obama was going to, seriously mess with the Constitution in ways that had never been seen before. Donald Trump is doing that on a virtually daily basis, Ed.
Well, back in 1981, when I heard that story on the radio, I was in the Air Force, and I said, someday that's going to come back and bite us. And I'm pretty sure I was right about that.
Yeah, you absolutely were, Ed. Ed, thanks a lot for the call. James in North Hollywood, listening on KPFK. Hey, James, what's up?
Yes, thank you. I love your show.
Thanks.
I just wanted I read an article the other day about low birth rates in most states across the country except for Utah and North Dakota. And I'm thinking that a lot of this has to, the racists and Trump supporters really has to do, a big part of it has to do with just being afraid that minorities are going to take over and the people of color are going to be taking over. And what do you think about that?
I think you're right. When Robert Patterson, who is now one of the senior officials in the Social Security Administration, Trump put him there, former right-wing commentator, when he was out there saying that we should ban condoms, or at least people shouldn't use condoms because it's so much better for women to get that fluid, shall we say, that it actually improves their cognitive function. The subtext in my mind of the whole anti-birth control, setting aside the Catholic dimension to it, but there's a huge right-wing anti-birth control movement, and it's associated with the white supremacy movement. It's basically they're opposed to birth control for white people, but the fact that our population isn't growing at a fast enough rate, and this made big news yesterday, the day before. Much like Japan, their population's not growing at a fast enough rate for replacement. I think that's good news. When I was born in this country, there was only 130 million people in the country. There's 340 million now. We did just fine back in 1951. And also one of the things that you learn is that as population declines, assuming that you've got some sort of reasonable division of wealth. Wealth is more equally distributed. You've got, fewer people fighting for the same resources, and so everybody gets a little richer as population declines. There are, dislocations that have to do with young people being available for work, and that the net effect of that is that it drives up wages. Again, I don't see that as a bad thing. If you look back at the Black Plague, the bubonic plague, the Black Death that hit Europe in the 1400s, as I recall, the 14th century, the 1300s, that killed off a third of the population of Europe, which created such labor shortages that working people were able to demand really huge wages. And the consequence was that they stopped working 60 and 80 hours a week and stopped being serfs who were owned by their employers and started becoming independent workers. This was the first union movement, the Masons, one of the very first movements, unions. And the consequence of that was the Renaissance. That was when people had enough spare time to do poetry and literature and music and art. And there was just this explosion of those four things and other, culture positive things. And it was all the result of a decline in population. So I view population decline as a good thing. And James, but I think that your point is spot on and absolutely right. Jack in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Jack, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I called you a while back because I had been suspended forever from Twitter because I sent a Twitter directly to Megyn Kelly saying basically, dear Miss Kelly, your use of blackface on Halloween is as painful to African Americans as it would be if someone were to call you, in quotes, a blonde bimbo. And she evidently complained and got me thrown off forever. So for several days, I kept saying, hey, I wrote a dissertation on metaphor. I'm an expert. It was a metaphor. And I linked them to my dissertation on Academia EDU, and I never heard a thing.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I don't think Jack Dorsey has a constitutional right to control a conversation on a totally public media.
Actually, he does, Jack.
Well, I know, but I said he shouldn't. Okay.
Okay.
And therefore, I am now searching for fellow suspendees to start a class action suit against Twitter. Voila, next day, I'm reinstated.
Wow, that's interesting.
Furthermore, I have not been controlling myself. I have been, tweeting out things that, like President Motherfucker, things like that.
Whoa, you can't use words like that on the air, Jack.
Sorry.
I am sorry. I've got to dump that, and we're going to go to a break.
You're listening to Thom
caught it.
Hartmann.
Okay.
Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Be right back. It's 48 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Apologies. I think that you guys, hopefully, you were all able to block that obscenity out. And if it got through, my sincere apologies. Barbara in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Barbara, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Well, hello, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Barbara?
Well, my ankle finally healed.
Oh, that's good. That's definitely
It took
good.
forever, but I got it done.
Yeah, that's one.
You know, there are in history there are three persons. Caligula, and if I got it right, Caligula used religion to kind of get his people on his side.
Okay. I'm not a scholar of Caligula. You know, the closest I got was watching that old porn film. So, and I only watched about half of it. So.
Yeah, well,
it wasn't that good.
Yeah, he used religion to let his people know because Christians were getting killed like flies.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm not going to do this no more. So, blase, Skippy.
Yeah.
We have Adolf Hitler. Who conjured and cajoled his people into believing, I'm going to rescue you, I'm going to save you, I'm going to do this for you.
And we're going to create 1,000 years of peace. Yes.
Yeah. Now, there's two kings that you might can tell me more about than I know. King Lear and Hamlet.
I don't know more about it than, you know, I read, in fact, I performed in one of those plays in high school, and but that's it. I mean, you know, it was all just lines.
They both were like Trump is right now. Trump is in a dilemma that he put himself in.
Yeah.
See, here's what what's really bothering me, and I do watch MSNBC. I have certain people that I do watch on MSNBC. I watch Joy Reid, Rachel Maddow, you know. But the daytime people are like, the Democrats need to capitulate.
Yeah, well, that's the daytime people are Republicans.
No. Donald Trump said over and over and over and over, who's going to pay for the wall? What does this crowd say? Mexico.
Right.
Who's going to pay for the wall? These people cannot pay their bill. I'm on Section 8. My rent won't get paid this month.
Ouch. But if you think that Nicole Wallace doesn't still support, you know, oligarchs and privatizing Social Security,
you know, Nicole Wallace is full of crap.
Yeah, let's be careful about our language here. But yes.
But I'm not. You know, I would never do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Because you know, this is so that people have to listen to their children, listen to the show. Come on now, people, watch your mouth.
Yeah.
Really, come on.
Yeah.
I understand the anger.
So we just have we got about 25 seconds here, Barbara, before we hit a break. What's the bottom line of what you're saying? What's the point?
The bottom line is the thing when it comes to the wall is a farce.
Yes.
Donald Trump knows he's in trouble. They're investigating him. This young gentleman is fixing to go to the Congress, which now, thank God, is run by Nancy Pelosi, and he's fixing to tell everything. And Donald Trump knows that his children are in deep trouble.
Yeah.
And we, America, have to suffer for it.
Well, and this is what concerns me, is if he declares a state of emergency and acquires new powers, he might use those powers to bail himself and his family out of trouble. And you know, I'm betting, Barbara, that conversation is going on in the White House between Trump and his lawyers. You know, how can I stop this thing in its tracks? And that's not a good thing. Barbara, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back, 52 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wesley in Concord, New Hampshire. Hey, Wesley, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Thank you. Back at you.
Yes, I have a question. I'm hearing about this war and 800,000 Americans out of without any paycheck. The question I have is, one, the Republicans control both houses of Congress and the White House for the last 2 years. If the war was so important, why did it not give Trump the money for the war?
That's a very good question, Wesley. And it raises the question also, was this entire thing a setup?
Because, yes, that's what my thinking. If they didn't give Trump the money for the war for the last 2 years, it looks like a setup because It makes no sense.
Yeah.
They control both houses and the White House, and they never built the wall.
Yep.
So as soon as the Democrats took over power, and then all this started happening.
Yeah.
So, and we were told that Mexico was going to pay for the war. Secondly, I see that in a very short period of time since Trump came to power, all the white supremacists have come out from the woodwork. The question I have is, in heaven, if there is a heaven, is it possible that when we go to heaven, there will be a separate quarters for the white people and a separate quarters for the colored people? Or there will be a separate quarters for the rich and a separate quarters for the poor?
Yeah.
You see, if you look, we have so much in America, but if you look just across the border in Mexico and Haiti, people are starving to death.
Yeah.
The question is God to be blamed, or we are to be blamed because we have everything that we need here?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Wesley. And if you're asking that rhetorically, I think it's a great rhetorical question in as much as it points out the silliness of the whole thing. If you're asking it theologically, Jesus was pretty unambiguous. He said rich people can't go to heaven. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. Wesley, great stuff. Thank you for the call. Sam in Stockbridge, Georgia. Hey, Sam, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, man, I've been listening to the show for about a few months, man. Appreciate it. I have two questions dealing with Christianity. One is dealing with Jerry Falwell, because I was reading an article from what he said when an interview on the Washington Post of him. He was saying about, one, that a poor person never gives anybody charity. But then again, Jesus gives poor widows put more than all the others. And another thing, he was saying that it's immoral for anyone to not to condone Trump.
Yeah.
And I'm just real concerned about it because Jerry Falwell, while I was looking for cool in college, I'm a Christian like you are as well. I'm more central politically wise. I like to listen to multiple sides, critical thinking wise. But I'm really glad I didn't go to Liberty because of how it's messed up free speech in a way.
Yeah.
And how is a bad representation of Christianity.
Yeah, Sam, my sense of it is that, and this is just purely my own personal opinion, that Jerry Falwell is not a Christian, at least not a Christian who would be recognized by Jesus or even Paul, that he's a hypocrite. And then I think he's also in big trouble right now. He and his wife were down in Florida at this resort a few years ago, and he met this very young, I think he was 21-year-old pool boy that he apparently fell in like with. And within a month or so, he's flying this guy around in his private jet all around the world. He's raised $1.something million for him to start a business. The business that he's started is something that's got to do with a hotel where they rent rooms by the hour and have a largely gay clientele. And I think Jerry Falwell has got some splaining to do, my sense of it is that he's hanging on to Trump as a way of trying to get away from this problem that he's facing.
Yeah, I understand that, but my thing about this is concerning is how can we save Christianity in a way, because I feel like the original rights corrupted it, and there's some good people there. There's this book. Have you heard of this pastor named John Polippo? He wrote a book called Hope and Other Superpowers. It's a pretty good book.
I haven't. But there's a lot of great Christian literature out there, Sam, and I share your concern. I think that Jesus has a lot of really good and important things to say, and so I'm willing to call myself a Christian. But Jerry Falwell has got nothing in common with me. Sam, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday on the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
know, here at the Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program. For our book club today, we're reading from a book that's long out of print, The History of World War II, Armed Services Memorial Edition. It's written by Francis Trevelyan Miller and the U.S. military, and with the Board of Historical and Military Authorities by Universal Book and Bible House in 1945. And this is from the chapter, The Phenomenon of Hitler. It starts out, his father was Alois Schicklgruber, the illegitimate child of a peasant girl who bore his mother's name until he was 40. Alois started out as a shoemaker's apprentice. Conscripted into the army, he rose to the rank of sergeant. That was so much above a mere cobbler, he stayed with the Army for 15 years. After his discharge, he received a so-called certificate appointment that made him a minor customs official with the Imperial Civil Service. He had worked up to what seemed to him high above the scorned class of common people, the peasants, and the poor little working men. That trait had its influence on his son, Adolf. Alois Schicklgruber married 3 times. His first wife, 14 years older than he, divorced him. While his first marriage was still valid, another girl, Franziska Matzelsberger, bore him a son, Alois. Schicklgruber married her after his divorced wife died. 2 months after their marriage, she bore him a daughter, Angela. 1 year later, his second wife died. 10 months thereafter, he married Clara Polzel, who was his junior by 23 years. He was 47 then and had in the meantime changed his name to obtain a legacy to Hitler. From his third marriage sprang 5 children, of whom 3 died in infancy. The 2 surviving were Adolf and Paula. Adolf Hitler's half-brother, Alois, ran away from home, complaining about cruel treatment by his father. He worked as a waiter in England, married an Irish girl, treated her cruelly, and begot a son, William Patrick Hitler. After Adolf came to power, Alois returned to Germany, leaving wife and son behind, and became a prosperous innkeeper. Adolf's half-sister, Angela, also followed him to Germany from Austria to care for his households in Munich and Berchtesgaden. She was the mother of unhappy Gel Rubal, the girl who is said to have committed suicide after becoming enamored of her uncle Adolf. His sister Paula, considered a queer person, lived a troublesome life in Vienna and became an ardent Nazi. William Patrick Hitler broke away from the Hitler clan and came with his mother to the United States to fight against the world scourge of Nazism. This young man, imbued with the spirit of freedom inherited from his liberty-loving Irish mother, joined the United States Navy. The historians of this volume held confidential talks with Hitler's nephews, some of which can be related here. He placed before us official documents which threw light on the background of Adolf Hitler. He told us about the years when he lived with his uncle at Berchtesgaden, the conduct and habits of the Fuhrer, how in his mountain retreat, the most strongly fortified in the world, Hitler planned and plotted world conquest. The nephew related to us the secrets of the mysterious Rudolf Hess and the Ernst Putzi Hofstadtgegel, who fled to England, the latter being held prisoner in Canada and later coming to the United States. Letters were submitted to document the facts. These are books in themselves, which undoubtedly will be revealed in future years. It is sufficient to state here that young Patrick Hitler fled from Berchtesgaden when he became convinced that his uncle, Adolf, was suffering from delusions of grandeur and a messianic complex which endangered his own nephew's life as well as Germany and the whole world. Having disposed of 1,000 of his intimates, Adolf Hitler's own family was not safe from attack. He would break into his nephew's room in the midnight hours to rant about how he would conquer the world. As a child, he was as difficult as Alois, his father. Father Alois was a tyrannical egoist with a mania for cruelty. Young Adolf liked to rage in rabid oratories, audience or no audience. His father called him daffy and lazy. He wanted his son to become an important personage like himself. But 11-year-old Adolf revolted against going to school and exposing himself to the heavy task of book learning. He hated his teachers. He hated his schoolmates. Faced by the odious realities of life as they were fearfully represented to him by a father with a big stick and an inclination for alcohol, Adolf wanted only to escape. He was 13 at the time of his father's death and 19 when his mother died. Of the 6 years between those two events, little is known about the boy's doings, except that he prevailed upon his mother to take him out of the hated secondary school, and that she encouraged him in his hobby of making drawings until his ego became inflated to the point that he believed himself a genius. He lived on his mother's pension until her death. With his mother and her income gone, the escapist days were over. He had to face life. A misfit, uneducated, arrogant, undeveloped in mind, stubborn and quarrelsome, without any moral concepts. Such was young Adolf Hitler when he entered Vienna in the beginning of 1909. Here his ego was deflated for the first time. He could not even pass his entrance exams to the Academy of Arts. His drawings were considered crude imitations, counterfeits. When a jury at the Academy of Munich refused a painting he submitted for exhibition, he stormed back to inquire who composed the jury. He learned that among them was a Jew who ranked as one of the outstanding masters of German art. At once, he blamed the jury's decision to exclude his work upon this Jew, declaring, "They shall pay for this." Precipitated from vainglory, Hitler woke to find himself an obscure outcast. In his despair, he stooped so low in his own estimation as to take up work as an unskilled laborer. To carry mortar on scaffolding was far beneath his dignity. He had not yet conceived the idea that Providence had chose him to be the leader of the master race. The history of World War II.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The book 31.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday. We're taking your calls. I just wanted to remind you, as we may be moving into this kind of emergency powers area, that we've been through this as a country before. In 1951, as I recall, maybe it was 52, Harry Truman was prosecuting the Korean War. And he wanted to seize U.S. steel. He wanted to seize a steel mill and force them to only manufacture steel for the war effort. He wanted to kind of get back to a World War II footing with regard to the Korean War. And the American people were not happy with this, by the way. In fact, Dwight Eisenhower ran on a campaign in the 1952 election of, and you've probably heard me many times play the clip on this program, vote for peace, vote for Eisenhower. That was, a paid film. That was what the ad said. And it was because people were fed up with Harry Truman and the Korean War. The Korean War was this terrible, brutal, and unauthorized, it lacked congressional authorization war. And we had just had a real war, an authorized war, World War II, and people were like, the Republicans in particular were like, this is not legal. So Truman said, I want to seize this steel mill and redirect all of its output specifically to making tanks and things like that. And he actually did so. He signed an executive order to make that happen. The steel mill protested, and it was Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company. And in a case, a Supreme Court case that is very famous among lawyers, it's called Youngstown Sheet and Tube v. Sawyer. The Supreme Court ruled that Harry Truman did not have the power to spend money to require Youngstown Sheet and Tube to shut down their operations for commercial purposes and just dedicate their output to the military. Now, the spend money part of that is the key to the whole thing. If you read the Supreme Court decision, they didn't say, Harry, you don't have the power to make an emergency declaration. He certainly had that power. And they didn't say you don't have the power to prosecute the war in Korea, although that's still debatable to this day. That wasn't what was before them. The question was, could the president's office use money that had been appropriated by Congress for running the executive branch? Could he use that to shut down this steel mill? And this is Justice William O. Douglas, and this Marjorie Cohn wrote a piece about this over on Truth Out. A tip of the hat to Jim Turr, an old friend who pointed it out to me. This is from Justice Robert Jackson's concurring opinion, actually. He says, first, when the president acts with express or implied authority of Congress, his power is at its greatest, right? And Congress had not authorized money to Truman to use to shut down the steel mill. See, it takes money to do pretty much anything, right? You got to hire somebody to go do it and deal with the problems and everything else. Congress hadn't done that. He said, second, in the absence of a grant or prohibition by Congress, the president can rely only on his own powers. He acts in a twilight zone where he and Congress may have concurrent authority, or their distribution of power remains uncertain. In this area, any actual test of power is likely to depend on the imperatives of events and contemporary imponderables rather than on abstract theories of law. Okay. And then third, when the president seeks to circumvent the expressed or implied will of Congress, which is clearly what Trump is doing here, quote, his power is at its lowest ebb, for then he can rely only upon his own constitutional powers minus any constitutional powers of Congress over the matter. Any presidential claim of such power, quote, must be scrutinized with caution, for what is at stake is the equilibrium established by our constitutional system. I think it's entirely possible. We all know that the reason Trump put Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court was because Brett Kavanaugh publicly had been stating rather loudly in recent days, prior to Trump reaching out to him. He wasn't on Trump's original list, and so he published this piece about how, I don't think the president should be prosecutable. And suddenly he was on Trump's list. But, and in all probability, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito will do whatever Trump wants. I mean, they're to the right of Trump. But, because Trump has no ideology anyway. But I'm getting the sense that John Roberts is saying enough already. We're not going to go down this crazy train road. I don't have any evidence for this other than, a few recent decisions where he's basically backing away from right-wing wackadoodle positions. I think that John Roberts is starting to worry about his legacy. But, we'll see. We'll see. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday, picking up your calls. Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, John. I love these Anything Goes Friday because I've been wanting to ask you this question for a long, long time to get your opinion on it. Why is the right wing, their heads exploding over Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a freshman congresswoman who just barely has taken the oath of office? I mean, I can't go on Facebook any day without seeing some kind of, article, who knows where it comes from, that blasts her. They just are obsessed with her. And I just want to know what your opinion is. Why her, and why this freshman congresswoman?
Well, first of all, she's young, she's attractive, she's smart, she's articulate, she's gregarious, she's all the things that the press loves, and so she's drawing the attention of the press. But more importantly, she said that she's a democratic socialist. And the billionaire oligarchs who fund the right-wing media machines and the right-wing think tanks are flipped out by that. They are libertarians, the Koch brothers and many of the others, the Mercers and whatnot. These people adhere, generally speaking, to a libertarian philosophy. The government should not be providing health care, should not be providing Social Security in old age, should not be doing basically the things that we all agree are the province of government. And so as she comes out and says, no, government should, she's talking like FDR, basically. And it's making them crazy because they saw what happened when FDR got into the White House. The people reelected him. He was elected president 4 times. I mean, it made them absolutely crazy, and they're doing everything. And that's why they're even rewriting history. Like I said a couple days ago, Google FDR, and you're going to find all these anti-FDR sites that come up first. The right has just, they have seeded the internet with this. And they're flipped out about AOC. They're just terrified of her. And of course, when the right gets terrified, they attack. So that's what, in my opinion, Mark, is going on. Thanks a lot for the call. Kathleen in Astoria, New York. Hey, Kathleen, thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. What's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm great, but I'll get better. Hopefully the same is true for you.
Well, I'm getting over bronchitis, so I hope I don't cough during my questions. But one of the I recently picked up Ralph Nader's book, To the Ramparts, How Bush and Obama Paved the Way for Trump Presidency. I haven't really started reading it yet, and I'm wondering if it even covers how Obama had deregulated the propaganda law that was in place to stop the U.S. from using propaganda on its own citizens. And then that led me to, I don't know if you heard about the recent brownout in Astoria, where the whole sky lit up like the Aurora Borealis, and it shut down power to LaGuardia Airport and Rikers Island.
Was that the one where the sky was like
thousands of people in New York?
That was where the sky was.
Have you heard about that?
That was the one where the sky was some bizarre color because I think it was green because the transformer was filled with copper.
Well, that's the explanation that they're giving. I mean, my mom worked at Con Edison, and in the 80s, there was a time when they wanted to evacuate all of Astoria within 10 minutes because they couldn't find a shutoff valve to a gas tank. And there was mayhem in the streets, traffic backed up. I mean, we are in the center of New York, where anybody trying to escape from the UN basically would have to go through Astoria to get to the two major airports. And we don't have an evacuation plan. So, I mean, my fear is that even if this Trump trying to use emergency powers to take over, that they could propagandize any kind of situation with, you know, what's going on now.
Yeah, he doesn't need a 9/11. He can make them up, which is what he's done with the border emergency.
And basically our infrastructure. I mean, we have an aging infrastructure at Con Edison, at Indian Point, that really should be spending the billions on.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to spend $5 billion? Well, you could also, you know, provide free college education to, I think, pretty much every kid in the United States for several years. But yeah, Kathleen's spot on. Thank you very much for the call. Our priorities are all screwed up, right? And Donald Trump is the prima facie evidence of that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. It's Anything Goes Friday on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your calls right after this. And welcome back. Joan in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Joan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I want to refer to I think it was the first call of today about, I think the caller was mentioning whites confronting other whites when they're being racist.
Yes, yeah, that was
And I think I mentioned this once before that, you know, whites are the only ones who can correct other whites as far as that is concerned.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like men listen to other men, whites listen to other whites, and, you know, on down the line. But, and I've only seen that happen. I watch a lot of news, and I've only seen that happen 4 times. It's so rare I can remember the people who confronted white racism. One is Michael Moore, one is Rob Reiner, the other one is Max Boot, and the other one is an ex-congressman or senator. And when they do that, the whites who are spewing the racism, you can see the expression on their face that it does impact them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more effective when it comes from one of your own, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And the thing about the destruction of democracy, this country was built on racism, and racism, in my opinion, will destroy it. First of all, if Trump was anyone other than a rich white male, he would be gone by now. If Obama had done anything like Trump is doing when he was in office, they would have hanged him from a tree on the White House lawn.
Well, they certainly would have impeached him, John.
Definitely. They would have found a reason. He would have been gone within 2 or 3 months of being in office. He would not be still in office causing the damage to democracy that Trump is being allowed to do. And I know there's a process, and I believe in processes, but we both know that this process that we are going through now, would have been circumvented had Obama done any of the things that Trump is doing.
I think that the wall for Trump is this news cycle's variation on the long-form birth certificate for Trump during the 8 years that President Obama was president. During those years, Trump's main racist trope, his way of waving the flag at other white racists, was to accuse the President of the United States of not being a citizen born in the United States simply because you could look at his skin and tell what color he was, and therefore he had to have come from Africa. It was a racist lie. And the same thing with the wall. This is just a cutout, a stand-in for racist rhetoric, in my opinion, Joan. And I think you're right. It is destroying America. So what do we do about it?
I really feel sorry for whites because, using the metaphor of the bus, the rich whites are driving the bus. The rest of the whites are in the middle of the bus. And they have been given straw man power to keep black people at the back of the bus.
Right.
But the whites in the middle of the bus aren't really being allowed to control anything that goes on in the front of the bus.
You're absolutely
kind of isolating.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that is produced, and by the way, that's been going on for 40 years, for a long, long time. And that has produced a lot of the backlash that I think both animated the Trump movement and the Bernie movement. Joan, thank you for the call. Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Judy in Pine, Colorado. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind today?
Hi. The Israel anti-boycott bill that is in the Senate right now is going to be the start of the finish of the First Amendment, along with the arrest and jailing of Julian Assange. Both freedom of speech and freedom of the press will be at the brink. Well, they're at the brink now, but with Julian's arrest, with this anti-Israel boycott law, the Israeli anti-boycott law, that opens everything up to stop speech on anything else they want to stop speech on. So the First Amendment is threatened right now. And most Democrats are supporting this bill. That Americans, by this bill, Americans will be basically swearing allegiance to Israel.
Yeah,
they will not be allowed to talk to anybody about Israel and boycotts or any sanctions or whatever, and they will not be able to join any protests that may have anything to do with being against actions being taken by Israel against the Palestinians.
Yep, you're right. And there was I believe it was a professor in, or maybe a PhD candidate, but I think it was a professor. Yeah, it was Angela Davis. You're right. Angela Davis was supposed to get this award. And because she had endorsed the BDS movement, the boycott and divestiture movement, which is in opposition to Israel's policies with regard to, in particular, Gaza, but also the Palestinians in the West Bank, that they stripped the award from her. I mean, that's mind-boggling. This is, and Mark Pocan, Congressman Pocan, a couple of days ago on this program, Wednesday, somebody called and asked him about this, and he said, this law is completely inconsistent with the First Amendment. You should have the right to say whether you're right or wrong. You know, whether it's a high noble calling or whether it's something totally crazy. I mean, if Nazis have the right to march in Charlottesville, then people should have the right to say whether it's correct or not, that they disagree with Israel's policies. And to criminalize that is mind-boggling.
They're allowed to beat people up and not get arrested, while peaceful protesters, if you're on the so-called left, get beat up by the cops, maced and arrested, thrown in jail, facing 70 years for conspiracy to riot. So our speech has already been threatened.
Oh yeah, and this has been going on for a long time. This goes back to the first installation of free speech zones back in the late 90s, and around the president, where they said, if you want to protest, you've got to go stand in this particular spot. And then Clinton started that out, and then George W. Bush just turned it into a thing. I mean, it was everywhere. And now Trump has taken that a step up. His rallies are campaign rallies, and literally from the first day of his presidency. And because they are private campaign events, they can allow only people to come in who meet their criteria, which is, have you donated more than once to the Trump campaign? If you have, then you can come into these rallies. And so, there's nary a voice of dissent. And then the media covers it as if it's actually a public event, when it's not. These are all private events. So, the whole thing is bizarre. Judy, thank you for the call. Well said. Izzy in Boulder, Colorado. Hey, Izzy, what's up?
Hey there. And just to lighten the mood a little bit, in light of our president telling FEMA not to help California out and that they need to clean it up themselves, I've decided that we've got a new slogan for him.
Okay.
It's Make America Rake Again.
Rake our forests. That's a good one. Make America rake again. Izzy, thank you. Thank you for calling and sharing that with us. James in Clear Lake Oaks, California. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm reading about these prospective shutdowns of GM plants, and I want to know, what you had to say.
Are you talking about the Ford plants in Europe? Or the GM plants in the Midwest?
The GM plants in the Midwest.
Okay.
Mainly, not that the Ford closures are unimportant or whatever, but because it's also related to international trade and everything, and also related to electric vehicles and cutting down greenhouse gases.
Yeah. No. The reason I asked is because the GM stuff was a few weeks ago and the Ford stuff was a couple days ago. So what's your question or point?
So basically, how soon do you think we should, as Democrats, shift our focus to that issue, and maybe do something like work on a bipartisan solution to this wall thing, where maybe we'll say, okay, we'll give you $1 billion, and you have to meet these requirements.
We already did. The legislation that passed the Senate unanimously last December 19th gave Trump $1.6 billion for the wall. That legislation was brought up in the House back last Thursday, and it passed with the majority of with all of the Democrats and 7, as I recall, Republicans. And it gives Trump over $1 billion for the wall. He says no, and Mitch McConnell says no.
We need to own this issue of jobs, though.
No, I agree with you. And Sherrod Brown is all over that. And by the way, keep an eye on this guy when he's running for president. He's going to be a force to be reckoned with. But you're absolutely right, and we'll see how it shakes out. James, thanks for the call. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Everything Goes Friday. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Our book today for the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. This is from the chapter, it starts with the chapter, A Life Edit, on page 4. I was scared. I couldn't not be. Being scared is what anxiety is all about. The bouts are coming closer and closer. I was worried where I was heading. It seemed there was no upper limit to despair. I tried to distract myself out of it. However, I knew from past experience alcohol was off limits, so I did the thing that had helped before to climb out of a hole, the thing I forget to do in my day-to-day life. I was careful about what I ate. I did yoga. I tried to meditate. I lay on the floor and placed my hand on my stomach and inhaled deeply, in, out, and noticed the stuttery rhythm of my breath. But everything was difficult. Even choosing what to wear in the morning made me cry. It didn't matter that I had felt like this before. A sore throat doesn't become less sore simply because you felt it before. I tried to read, but found it hard to concentrate. I listened to podcasts. I watched new Netflix shows. I went on social media. I tried to get on top of my work by replying to all my emails. I woke up and clasped my phone and prayed that whatever I could find there would take me out of myself. But, spoiler alert, it didn't work. I began to feel worse, and many of the distractions were doing nothing but driving me further to distraction. And T.S. Eliot's phrase from his 4 quartets, I was distracted from distraction by distraction. I would stare at an unanswered email with a feeling of dread and not be able to answer it. Then on Twitter, my go-to digital distraction of choice, I noticed my anxiety intensify. Even just passively scrolling my timeline felt like an exposure of a wound. I read news websites, another distraction, and my mind couldn't take it. The knowledge of so much suffering in the world didn't help put my pain in perspective. It just made me feel powerless and pathetic that my invisible woes were so paralyzing that when there were so many visible woes in the world. My despair intensified. So I decided to do something. I disconnected. I chose not to look at social media for a few days. I put an auto response on my emails too. I stopped watching or reading the news. I didn't watch TV. I didn't watch any music videos. Even magazines I avoided. During my initial breakdown years before, the bright imagery of magazines always used to linger and clog my mind with feverish racing images as I tried to sleep. I left my phone downstairs when I went to bed. I tried to get outside more. My bedside table was cluttered with a chaos of wires and technology and books I wasn't really reading. So I tidied up and took them away too. In the house, I tried to lie in darkness as much as possible, the way you might deal with a migraine. I had always, since I was first suicidally ill in my 20s, understood that getting better involved a kind of life edit, a taking away. As the minimalist advocate Fumio Sasaki put it, there's a happiness in having less. In the early days of my first experience of panic, the only things I had taken away were booze and cigarettes and strong coffees. Now, though, years later, I realized that a more general overload was the problem, a life overload, and certainly a technology overload. The only real technology I interacted with during this present recovery, aside from the car and the cooker, were yoga videos on YouTube, which I watched with the brightness turned low. The anxiety didn't miraculously disappear, of course not. Unlike my smartphone, there is no slide to power off function for anxiety. But I stopped feeling worse. I plateaued. And after a few days, things began to calm. The familiar path of recovery arrived sooner rather than later. And abstaining from stimulants, not just alcohol and caffeine, but these other things, was part of the process. I began, in short, to feel free again. Most people know the modern world can have physical effects, that despite advances, aspects of modern life are dangerous for our bodies. Car accidents, smoking, air pollution, a sofa-dwelling lifestyle, takeout pizza, radiation, that 4th glass of Merlot. Even being at a laptop can pose physical dangers. Sitting down all day, getting an RSI. Once I was even told by an optician that my eye infection and blocked tear ducts were caused by staring at the screen. We blink less, apparently, when working on a computer. So as physical health and mental health are intertwined, couldn't the same be said about the modern world and our mental states? Couldn't aspects of how we live in the modern world be responsible for how we feel in the modern world? Not just in terms of the stuff of modern life, but its values too. The values that cause us to want more than we have, to worship work above play, to compare the worst bits of ourselves with the best bits of other people, to feel like we always lack something. And as I grew better day by day, I began to have an idea about a book. This book right here. I've already written about my mental health and reasons to stay alive, but the question now was not why should I stay alive? The question this time was a broader one. How can we live in a mad world without ourselves going mad? As I began researching, I quickly found some attention-grabbing headlines for an attention-grabbing age. Of course, news is almost always designed to stress us out. If it was designed to keep us calm, it wouldn't be news, it would be yoga or a puppy. So there's an irony about news companies reporting on anxiety while also making us feel anxious. Anyway, here are some of the headlines. Stress and social media fuel mental health crisis among girls, from The Guardian. Chronic loneliness is a modern-day epidemic from Forbes. Facebook may make you miserable, says Facebook, Sky News. Steep rise in self-harm among teenagers from the BBC. And on it goes. The book Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And then he goes through the whole process there. Confessions of a Rogue Nuclear Regulator by Gregory B. Jackso. It's 34 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. On the line with us, we're going to get back to your calls in just a moment on Anything Goes Friday, but on the line with us is Harvey Kaye, Professor of Democracy and Justice Studies at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay, the author of numerous books. His latest, The Fight for the Four Freedoms, What Made FDR and the Greatest Generation Truly Great. Today is the 75th anniversary of FDR's Second Bill of Rights. His Twitter handle is Harvey J. Kaye, K-A-Y-E. And his website, well, that's his Twitter handle. Harvey, welcome back to the program.
Tom, good to hear your voice.
It's nice to have you on. So I don't think most Americans even know that a sitting president of the United States 75 years ago today called for free college education for everybody, free health care for everybody, and an absolute guarantee that your job will pay you enough that you can have a reasonable standard of living, along with two other things.
That shows you how effective the suppression of memory has been by conservatives, and how much the left, or liberals at best, have turned their backs on a tremendous legacy, the legacy we ought to be reviving today.
Yeah, amen. So tell us about it.
Well, and when FDR ran for president originally in 1932, he first called for an economic declaration of rights. And I don't know how many people actually took him seriously when he said that, but I think he was sincere even at that time. And then in 1941, when the United States had yet to enter World War II, he delivered a State of the Union message which called for, or at least the pursuit of, a world characterized by four essential freedoms: freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And it did become the sort of guiding philosophy of the war effort. But I still don't think people were quite ready to take it as seriously as he probably intended it. And then in 1944, in the State of the Union message, with the intention of running again for president that year, he put even more emphasis on those four freedoms by elaborating and stating in that message this Bill of Rights, a second Bill of Rights, or an economic Bill of Rights. And really, it became not simply a sort of handy device in the State of the Union message, but the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, they actually launched a major campaign that year in 1944, making that vision of a second Bill of Rights the heart of the campaign. They went out, they were going to organize people to vote, they issued pamphlets. I mean, it was a tremendous project on their part. And of course, FDR won once again, his fourth time for president. Now, I can tell you that that kind of speech was not welcomed by Republicans and was not necessarily welcomed by Southern Democrats. And FDR was under no illusion that he would be able to see the enactment of that second Bill of Rights he was calling for. However, he did envision the possibility that after the war, those kinds of freedoms, those kinds of rights would become part of American public discourse and possibly enacted in various forms. And I'll just add that though it did not happen in that way, of course, the GI Bill of Rights, which was enacted in 44 and 45, became very much the basis upon which the United States took off after World War II and literally created the middle class.
Right. It was with all these things. So go through the five elements of the Second Bill of Rights.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting list. He actually calls, I'll just read a few of the lines: the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation. And notice, and recreation.
Right, you can take a vacation every year.
Yeah, exactly. That was essential for not only economic security, but for well-being. He actually mentions the right of every farmer to raise and sell his produce at a return which will give him and his family a decent living. The right of every family to a decent home. How's that for a concept?
Right, guaranteed housing. That's right.
Right. The right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, which I think goes back also to that idea of recreation.
Right.
Similarly, he talks about the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment. And by no means the least of them, the right to a good education. And let's not forget that FDR himself, in that GI Bill of Rights, envisioned the education and the training of an entire generation of young Americans who had enlisted and fought or been drafted and fought in some fashion in World War II. And that involved up to 16 million young Americans.
And he accomplished that, by the way. I mean,
and you bet 12 million of the veterans, which included men and women, actually took advantage of those things. And as I said, it really did lead to the development of not only a phenomenal higher education system in the United States, because colleges necessarily expanded, but also a generation literally improved themselves, radically transformed themselves and the nation at the very same time. And I would also add that vision of the Second Bill of Rights also comes up as part of the Great Society initiatives of the 1960s.
Of LBJ, yeah, amen.
Right.
So hopefully, as more and more Democratic candidates are stepping forward to talk about, yes, I would like to be president. We already have,
right.
Yeah, we've got several so far. Elizabeth Warren was first to announce. It looks like Kamala Harris is going to be next. Sherrod Brown is making some noises. These are all good, solid progressives who I would think would be 100% behind the Second Bill of Rights. And in my opinion, it's time for the Democratic Party to return to its FDR roots and just start overtly saying these kinds of things.
Right. I would remind people that in November of 2015, Bernie actually gave a speech at Georgetown University, which was nationally streamed, in which he reminded Americans of FDR's Second Bill of Rights or Economic Bill of Rights. I can readily imagine AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, resurrecting these things. I mean, for what it's worth, I'm tweeting this as much as I can to get the word out. I noticed there's an article in The Nation today. I mean, there is discussion.
Mm-hmm.
A smart set of Democrats. We need a vision. And this would be the basis for that kind of vision.
Yeah, amen. Harvey Kaye, professor of democracy and justice studies at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay, the author of The Fight for the Four Freedoms, among other numerous and brilliant books. My favorite of all the things you've written is your book on Thomas Paine. What was the title of that again?
Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, still alive and well, so they can find it in various places.
There you go. Harvey, and you can tweet him at HarveyJK, Kaye. Harvey, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Tom. Anytime. Thank you.
My pleasure. Great talking with you. It's a marvelous day. Jeff in San Francisco, listening on AM 910, Real Talk, I believe it's called. Jeff, you're on the air.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to announce that the Public Bank Institute in San Francisco had a big old part. I sent you a tweet about this. You might look for it.
Okay.
And we had 250 people there celebrating our push for a public bank and putting on the November ballot coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big success. And we had, I'd say, over 50 to 60% were young people there. So that's very
marvelous.
And I'd like to shout out to a lot of this was infused by Standing Rock and the people who partake in that. And that's what inspired Alexandria Cortez to really go for it.
Yeah.
And so I just think the Native American population that fought for Standing Rock needs a big shout out because they really
and if public banks are going to happen someplace in the United States, I mean, it happened in North Dakota back in 1919 or something like that.
100-year anniversary coming up.
Yeah, there you go. And but it's the only state in the union that does this, where the state actually runs all the money that it generates and that it taxes and that it spends. All that money goes through a bank owned by the state. So all the money made from banking activities becomes profit for the state. If California did this, the state would literally save billions of dollars every year. Billions.
Trillions. It's unbelievable how much money we actually have. If you think of your home as an equity in it, how much do you think equity we have in just all the public places that we own, where we could pull out 20% of equity out of it and use creativity in our banking.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Jeff, good luck with that, and keep us up to date on how it goes. I appreciate the call. Justin in Chula Vista, California. Hey, Justin, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I wrote out a question, and I just wanted to ask it to you, so here it goes. So I've recently gotten into the works of Richard Wolff. I've heard some of his talks. I started reading one of his books, and I've really enjoyed the idea of workers' cooperatives and, general syndicalism and collectivization, right, these ideas. I know you talked to him in the past, so I think you guys are pretty in line with these concepts. And now that I'm sold on this idea of worker-controlled enterprises, what are the logistics in actually moving to democratized workplace?
I wrote a book about this. It's called Threshold, The Crisis of Western Civilization. On the last chapter of it, Louise and I went over to Mondragon, the place that Richard Wolff is always talking about. This was maybe 10 years ago when I wrote the book. We went over there and met with the senior management and whatnot. This is the largest co-op in the world. I think they do about $50 billion a year in business in like 15 or 20 different countries, maybe more. And it's entirely worker-owned. The CEO makes 4 times what the lowest-paid janitor makes. It's an extraordinary model. I also traveled to Wisconsin, up to Madison, and interviewed Peninsula Engineering, I think is the name of the company. It's a tool and die maker or a precision parts manufacturer, which is employee-owned. Interviewed the people who worked at Union Cab Company, which is an employee-owned, worker-owned co-op. There are certain state laws that make it easier to set up co-ops, and some states make it very easy, some states make it very difficult. Wisconsin's very friendly to co-ops. Louisiana is very hostile to them. So number one, you need a consistency among our state laws across the country. And then number two, we need to stop giving extraordinary benefits and subsidies to for-profit corporations and start offering some of those above and beyond just what for-profit corporations get to these nonprofit entities that are worker-owned co-ops. Justin, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour, back with more of your calls. Well, actually, we're going to check in with Talk Media News here in 4 minutes and get the news, and then we'll continue with Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I have a pretty decent way I think we can reduce our carbon footprint pretty quickly. There's no big trucks, diesels on the drawing board. All right? So we just make sure all our diesels convert to bio. And the same with our trains. See, our trains run on electric generators run by diesel engines. Make them run on biodiesel. It would help our farmers out, it'd reduce our footprint, and it's something we could do real quickly.
Yeah, that could be done rapidly. You know, Elon Musk is also making electric long-haul trucks. And
yeah, but you have to switch batteries and stuff. A truck driver has to be able to go, and he doesn't have time. You know, during his layover, if they can make the battery last as long as he can drive, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
But if you can't, you don't have time to do that. But with diesel, with biodiesel, the diesel was originally designed to run on peanut oil as a competitor to gas.
Yep. And gas was originally designed to run on alcohol. And diesels were originally designed to run on basically kerosene.
No, peanut oil.
Oh, peanut oil. Okay.
Yeah. That's what the guy designed it for, because the guy knew that burning gas was going to pollute the planet, cause a greenhouse effect, and eventually kill the planet.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think you're absolutely right, Paul. You know, the fact of the matter is that we subsidize the fossil fuel industry here in the United States to the tune of about $300 billion a year, and that's what we've got to stop. The step one toward anything, including a Green New Deal, is to stop the subsidies to fossil fuels. Paul, thanks for the call. Very well said. Corky in Rochester, New York. Hey, Corky, what's up?
How you doing, Tom? Yeah, there's only one way to get Trump out of here. You start making fun of the guy. He can't stand that.
Yeah.
Everybody make fun of his stupid
idea. Well, I think that's why Schumer and Pelosi are using the word tantrum repeatedly.
Yeah.
And Schumer did everything except say that, you know, he slammed his little tiny hand down on the desk.
Oh, that would have really set him off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once you make fun of him, once you get rid of the head of the snake, then the rest of the body dies. All the Trump followers, they'll feel like fools for supporting him.
Yeah, for supporting a guy who had been regularly and roundly ridiculed. Yeah. So the challenge here, Corky, is, how do you convince the news media that Trump has disrespected them by lying to them and lying about them, and therefore they no longer need to respect him, even if they want to respect the office, and therefore they can be disrespectful in a way that's comedic. I mean, I see this happening on the evening shows, and I catch the clips of Colbert and the Daily Show with Mr. Trevor Noah and so on. But I'm certainly not seeing this in the news.
Well, you've seen it in the 2011 breakfast, or
Oh, you're talking about the correspondence dinner. Louise and I were there. We watched Donald Trump get taken down by Barack Obama. We were just maybe 100 yards away. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Or maybe 50 yards away, actually. Yeah, Corky, thanks a lot for the call. I agree. But I don't run the media. But I do run this show, and no problem making fun of Trump here. We'll be back with Luke Vargas with Talk Media News in just a moment. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do. Ellen Ratner's new book. On the line with us is Luke Vargas, the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News. He joins us today from the UN in New York. If you want to hear Luke break down one world news story every day, search Luke Vargas or Talk Media News, wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Luke. So the U.S. is starting to pull out of Syria. Tell me about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway today, and I will precede any of my comments by saying I'm not judging this strategy. I'm just sort of reporting the sequence of events here. I mean, what's confusing is that we were told earlier this week from John Bolton and also from Mike Pompeo yesterday and other officials that, the administration has abandoned any sort of hasty timeline that isn't tied to conditions on the ground. But then we learned today, and what they said were the two conditions would be a promise to protect the Kurds coming from Turkey, and this is again a very sort of difficult to define objective, but a lasting defeat of ISIS would need to be achieved before we withdraw.
Yeah, and on their first point, Erdogan comes out and says, "No way, forget it. You're insulting me."
Yeah. No, precisely right. Well, I guess to stay with the first point about the promise from the Turks. We had John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, doing an interview with Hugh Hewitt today in which he says Mike Pompeo, and President Trump all understand that, quote, Turkey is committed not to harm the Kurds who fought with us versus ISIS, end quote. I mean, this to me reminds me of the language surrounding the official explanations about Khashoggi coming from the Saudi government. Hey, we believe it. We think we've gotten the assurance. They tell us they're not going to do it. We believe them. And I think it's pretty difficult to say any sort of assurance like that exists, given that you saw Turkey's defense minister just today saying a military offensive against various Kurdish groups in Syria is actually being drawn up as we speak.
Right.
So, so then the other one is the lasting defeat of ISIS. We'll put that aside. I mean, I just don't know how you do more of a military defeat against ISIS as your troops are leaving. But what we learned today is indeed military equipment has already started to leave the battle area. Not troops yet. In fact, it's for the short term, it looks like more troops are actually being brought into Syria in order to help, guard facilities and stuff as equipment is taken out. But I think it all comes around to this sort of realization that the signals are getting crossed. The military, when talked to by the AP today, some military officials are saying, hey, we don't take cues from John Bolton. We got orders to withdraw, and we're executing that because that's the last order we got. And it just makes me think this would not be happening if General Mattis were still chairing the Defense Department. I mean, It's just hard to imagine some sort of bungled cross wires type of, line of command quite of the sort we're seeing now. And then on the political side, I still just think it's not really viable to pretend that our leverage vis-a-vis the Turks to try to get a promise about the Kurds is going to increase as our troops leave. We're going to be basically showing less and less of an ability to shape any of the future events in Syria, and yet still maybe or perhaps increasingly urgently asking them to give us political concessions. And so something's got to give here.
And if I'm remembering correctly, Luke, this all started when noted libertarian Rand Paul went golfing with Donald Trump and said, you know, you campaigned on being a non-interventionist, and what are you doing in Syria? We shouldn't be there. And Trump said, okay, and he went back and the next morning announced, we're pulling out of Syria, before he'd even talked to his generals. He'd just talked to Rand Paul. Am I remembering that right?
I think the only other thing I would add to that timeline is around the same time, it may have even been before the Rand Paul bit, is there's a phone call with the Turkish president.
Oh, that's right.
Erdogan.
That's right. That was the big one, actually.
But it was reported that Erdogan, like, really deftly sort of repeated back President Trump's campaign talking points to him in a way which just sort of caused him to change policy on the spot. So again, no judgment. I don't know how you know, frankly, we're picking between a lot of bad case scenarios in Syria. Is you're not going to really get the kind of perfect exit that maybe some people think is possible. But yet I still think there's just a lot of evidence of confusion within the chain of command, and I think that's just worth highlighting.
This highway, or how do you pronounce it? Huewei highway?
Huawei.
Huawei. Thank you, Luke. This Huawei story. Is the Huawei the daughter of the founder? Is she still in jail in Canada?
It's been since December 1st, so that's drawing on. The news today is that there's been an arrest by Polish authorities of a prominent Polish cyber intelligence official and the Poland country director for Huawei, who have now been charged with spying for China. I think two bits are really interesting here. One is that the director of Huawei in Poland was a former embassy official, and this is a pattern we're seeing quite a bit, which is that Chinese, foreign policy officials who have a really good sense of foreign countries are in many times circulated into the telecom industry, which I think is a suspicious thing. I mean, clearly revolving doors are not pretty commonplace in the United States, but why is it that, a telecom company needs such people who know the inside?
Well, the accusation against Huawei was that they were building basically backdoors, trapdoors, whatever they're called, into not just their phones, but into their switching equipment, their telecommunications equipment that phone companies use to run cell towers. So China could basically listen in on any conversation anywhere, anytime that they wanted. And an awful lot of the equipment used all over the world is manufactured by Huawei.
Yeah, no, Huawei's goal is to roll out 5G across Europe and Africa and South America, in many of these countries getting their first really top-notch cell phone network conveniently built by them. I think the Poland case is particularly interesting. The Polish official who's arrested had previously worked to build a secure communication system for Poland's political leaders. And in the same year it's coming out, Huawei offered to the Polish government, free of charge, a Chinese telecom conference system. And so put it all together, are we seeing some sort of thing where the Chinese served up a technology with a backdoor on it, then you have an official within the Polish intelligence install that system for the use of Poland's leaders, and then, of course, the Chinese would probably be the beneficiaries of whatever they can listen to in those calls.
Thus the spying charge.
Seem to be the setup. Yeah, thus the spying charge. And just say very briefly, let's watch Poland here. They've been mentioned a lot by the U.S. recently as helping to contain Iran. Yeah. Now they're playing a bit part in this broader U.S.-China trade war, a country to watch.
Got it. Okay, Luke Vargas. You can check out his podcast. Just Google Luke Vargas, or wherever you get your podcast, or search for it. Talk Media News, Chief Foreign Correspondent. Luke, thanks a lot for dropping by today.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.
And you can follow Luke over on Twitter at The Courier. We'll be back with more of Anything Goes Friday right after this. It's coming up on 58 minutes past the hour. You know, here at the Thom Hartmann Program, we're creating basically 3 programs identically at the same time. We've got the normal commercial program. We have our television program that is carried by Free Speech TV, and we do fundraisers for Free Speech TV, and a small amount of that money comes back to us, which helps us provide that show to Free Speech TV. So that stream has its own revenue stream in it. And then we also provide a nonprofit radio show with no commercials in it that's completely nonprofit compliant to our Pacifica affiliates, to the stations all over the country, nonprofit stations. We pay for that one because we don't charge them by your support at Patreon. And in exchange for that, over on Patreon, you can get the full 3-hour show, archives of the show, and special clips like this amazing clip that we're just now putting up about 6 ways America is becoming a third world country. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this clip was useful to you, and thanks so much for supporting our program. We're reading today from Justin Frank, Dr. Justin Frank's book, Trump on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President. He's the guy who wrote Bush on the Couch and Obama on the Couch. He's a psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And the book just came out. This is from the introduction. There's no question that Trump is mentally unfit in ways that make him psychologically unsuited for the presidency. That in itself is a truly alarming turn of events. And I'd write the entire book in all caps if I thought that would better convey the sense of urgency with which it is written and should be read. Any number of troubling mental illness diagnoses and character evaluations can be and have been accurately applied to Trump. Both can vary from analyst to analyst, however, without necessarily sacrificing any of the accuracy. More to the point, the true value of a diagnosis is to determine an appropriate course of treatment, and there's no indication that any sort of treatment is a viable option. Trump on the Couch then seeks not simply to make the case that Trump is not well, but rather to show how he is unwell in ways that would have been of particular interest to the applied psychoanalysts whose investigation likely preceded our own, the Russians, and perhaps even their American allies or counterparts, who in the long tradition of intelligence gathering examined Trump's psyche and found an opportunity for exploitation. Trump's presidency caps a lifetime of dysfunction and disorder that is not likely to be healed while he is in office. Just as Trump's ascendancy among voters gives expression to long-standing trends in the American electorate's psyche that are not going to be easily addressed. However, if we can identify certain aspects of these disorders and trends that may have contributed to Trump and his voters fusing into a shared belief system, then we have a better chance of fostering the kind of honest cultural discussion that will be necessary in order to contain and repair the damage that has already been done. Understanding Trump calls for a consideration of his psychodynamics almost certainly more rigorous than he has ever embarked upon on his own. Trump dismissed psychotherapy as a crutch in his 2004 Playboy interview. Years later, talking to biographer Michael D'Antonio, he described in greater detail a generalized aversion to introspection beyond the therapeutic setting. Quote, "I don't like to analyze myself because I might not like what I see," he told D'Antonio. "I don't like to analyze myself. I don't like to think too much about the past," end of quote. Even armed with a detailed family history, we can't capture Trump in action with only the tools of applied psychoanalysis. Like some of the most disturbed patients I've worked with, Trump is so erratic, constantly changing the topic, elevating the stakes, and raising the volume, that one doesn't know what to expect from him next. It's hard to imagine him in treatment, even as the subject of an applied psychoanalytical investigation. He behaves like a patient who is simultaneously banging a consulting room window, rattling on its door, ringing the phone, and texting or tweeting his demands for attention. Trump presents so many troubling affects that it's hard to remember them all. In the final weeks of the first year of Trump's presidency, Michael Wolff and David K. Johnston published accounts of the Trump White House that present a president with a startling number of disturbing characteristics. Any one of these demonstrable and suspected traits would raise calls for a psychoanalytic investigation if it was done on a layperson. In a president, in aggregate, they are truly cause for alarm. The list of worrisome, evident, and alleged attributes that emerge in these and other portraits is long. Narcissist, liar, racist, sexist, adulterer, baby, hypocrite, chiseler, tax cheat, outlaw, psychopath, paranoid, fraud, ignorant, vengeful, delusional, arrogant, greedy, contemptuous, unsympathetic, learning disabled, cruel, obstructor of justice, threat to the Constitution, traitor. The list is so long that it can be overwhelming. It's a challenge to remember the beginning by the time you make it to the end. There are times when I wish someone would help us remember all the troubling aspects of Trump's character and behavior, past and present, in a way that would encourage recognition of the totality of his pathology, rather than its component parts, which individually cause alarm before being temporarily forgotten when the next emergency presents itself. As an applied psychoanalyst, my task is not only to appreciate the full list, but also to ignore the big picture and focus on a single pathology at a time. Practitioners of applied psychoanalysis approach their subject as both theoretician and clinician. The theoretician endeavors to piece things together, to figure things out, while the clinician tries to approach each session capable of being surprised, as if his mind were a blank slate. The analysis in the following pages aspires to accomplish both goals: reviewing Trump's record with a clinician's eye, preparing to be surprised by the unexpected observation, and assembling these findings into a more comprehensive portrait. The image of hypothetical patient Trump rattling the consulting room door and banging on the window reminds us that President Trump doesn't want us to see the entire list at once. Not only that, but patients I've treated who are reminiscent of Trump cannot tolerate being inside the consulting room either. They leave my office whenever they feel unable to think their way through an anxiety-provoking interpretation, much the way Trump leaves press briefings when the questions get too close. Trump on the Couch by Justin Frank.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
First tally had Fillmore in the lead. How to get rid of a president.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday. The Senate has just adjourned. The Democrats were going to try to keep it open throughout the weekend so that they could, I don't know, either make a statement or perhaps even try to bring up the legislation that passed the House, which is the exact same identical bill that passed the Senate on December 19th. That would have reopened the government and given Donald Trump $1.6 trillion for his damn wall. But it wasn't enough, right? And so Mitch McConnell said, no, we're not going to hold a vote on that. He's been saying it all week. We're not going to hold a vote on that because Donald Trump will veto it. Well, the simple reality is if Donald Trump vetoed it, there are more than enough votes in the Senate. This passed unanimously on December 19th. Now, even assuming that a number of these Republican senators are going to say, oh, no, I'm going to stand with Donald Trump now, times are different, there's still 66 votes in the Senate to override a veto, particularly when you consider 22 senators, Republican senators, looking at re-election in a little over a year and a half. And so you got that. And then in the House of Representatives, they just passed a piece of legislation that says that federal employees who got screwed, who didn't get their paychecks, will be made whole. That's not going to help the contractors, and it's not going to help people who now their entire budget has been all just blown up because they've got fees and penalties and all they bounced checks. I mean, whatever it may be, and suddenly they're behind. Particularly people like the TSA workers, who are pretty much at the bottom of the federal pay scale, who are in many cases living hand to mouth. In fact, the Miami airport has just announced that Saturday, from noon Saturday until as I recall, 6 a.m. Sunday morning, and then from noon or 1 p.m. Sunday until the same time Monday morning, they're shutting down Terminal G in the Miami airport. That's the terminal that is used mostly by United Airlines. So it's starting to bite. And they're doing this because in Miami, the TSA workers are calling in at almost twice the national rate, calling in sick. When in fact, probably what they're doing is they're taking part-time jobs. They're getting gigs as Uber drivers or TaskRabbits or whatever it may be. And, or finding something in the newspaper, some way to get actual cash to make it through. And on this program on Tuesday, I think it was, I suggested that if there were any TSA employees listening, and I know that typically there are, because every time I go through an airport, not every time, but probably every other time I go through an airport, at least one TSA person recognizes me. Typically after they see my name on on my ID. So if you're listening, TSA folks, and it's always nice to say hi to you in line, but if you're listening, the leverage that you have, the leverage the TSA has that will drive Trump and the Republicans nuts is the pre-line, the pre-check line. The pre-check line, many just regular coach, frequent flyers qualify. In fact, probably the majority of people who are are just very, very frequent flyers. And Pre is now selling this. I think it's $75 for 5 years or something like that to get pre-check. But also, if you get a first-class ticket on any airline, you are pretty much automatically in Pre. I mean, the airlines do that for you. And so if you shut down the pre-check lines, you're going to be hitting the members of Congress going home, which they're doing today. You're going to be hitting the lobbyists going home. You're going to be hitting the big money people who are flying around, the ones who have enough money, but you can't quite afford a private jet. You're not going to get the CEOs, but you're going to get everybody else, and you're going to create some serious disruption. Well, disruption is the wrong word. I'm not advocating disrupting our air traffic control system, but shall we say it would draw some attention. Because I know a lot of people who have Pre, I'm one of them, don't show up at the airport 2 hours in advance because they know that it's going to take them 10 minutes to get through the line. So, they show up 30 minutes in advance, go through the lines, stop at the bathroom, and go right to the gate and get on the plane. I mean, that's about it, right? All of a sudden now they're throwing in a line that's an hour and a half long. Things are going to change. So, just an idea. Anyhow, anything goes Friday. Matt in Napa, California. Hey, Matt, thanks for listening to AM 910. What's up?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to talk about a story that came out a few months ago, which was RFK Jr. coming out saying that he was in favor of reopening the assassination of his father.
Yes,
and,
the investigation.
Some quick background points on why he probably said that was that, Sirhan was, by all witness accounts, in front of RFK when he was assassinated, and the coroner, the L.A. County coroner, Thomas Noguchi, pretty famous, well-respected coroner, his report showed that 3 shots that hit Kennedy were actually from behind and went very close range, one right behind his ear, which makes it pretty unlikely that they were fired by Sirhan. The district attorney moved to have Noguchi fire. Actually, they asked Noguchi first if he would just please, not release the report, and he said, no, I'm not willing to do that. He was fired, and then he was later, appealed that case and was rehired. And then one of the other significant points, and people that were old enough at the time to remember this, I was about 8, so I do remember the famous lady with the polka dot dress who encountered a woman and a man, a fire escape in the back that said, "Hey, we shot him," and Sandra Saunders was her name, the Kennedy worker who witnessed this, and shot who? Shot Kennedy. Anyway, there's an interview with her. I will give the L.A. County Police credit. They claimed they didn't want a repeat of the JFK assassination, so they taped everything. And there's this tape recording of Hank Hernandez of the L.A. County Police Department interrogating this woman, basically, and breaking her down. You can listen to this online. It's pretty incredible what he has to say. So she did eventually say, well, I'll tell them, whatever you want to say. So, the significance there is that really seemed to show an actual attempt to have this thing covered up.
This was also a mob-owned and mob-run hotel, and the mob, of course, is who took out Jack. And because Bobby we had gone from, I think the maximum number of prosecutions of organized crime that the federal government had ever involved itself in was either 13 or 18, and that was as of 1960. 1961, Jack Kennedy comes into office, and in that first year, over 700 prosecutions of organized crime figures, most notably Carlos Marcello and Sandro Trafficante, the guys who actually conspired to kill Jack. So, I've long been of the opinion that the mob also killed Bobby, and that I believe the security guy who was behind him that they think might have shot him was also involved with one of the unions that was mobbed up at the time. Am I recalling that correctly, Matt?
I don't know that detail. You could be correct. I'm not up on that. But one other point is that none of this ever appeared in front of the jury. They never had any of the details.
The Sirhan jury, No, I agree with Bobby. I think it's time to reopen all of this stuff. The CIA is still sitting on 1 million pages of notes that have to do with the assassination of Jack Kennedy, and there's still some of us around who are old enough to remember this, and we'd like to know what the hell happened. And I suspect there's a lot of young people who'd also like to know. The president of the United States assassinated. You've got the guy who was going to be the next president of the United States. There was no doubt in anybody's mind if Bobby won the Democratic primary and he was going to win it, he was going to be the next president, and he was taken out. And this is a very, very important and consequential moment in the history of the United States. Matt, thanks for the call and thanks for pointing all that out. Michael in Long Beach, New York. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, Tom? First time, long time.
Thank you. Back at you. Or thank you for calling. Sorry.
And I knew what you meant. I know this may seem trivial, but I can't help but think this. But to add to Trump's sociopath personality is that. He doesn't have any pets whatsoever.
Yeah, never has. I think that's an example of his lack of empathy. He can't even relate to another mammal, much less other human beings.
Yeah, and also, this goes all the way back to Chester A. Arthur was the last time a president that didn't have a pet whatsoever. But since then, even they would have at least fish presidents afterwards. But throughout all that time, Yeah.
No, there is something very, very strange about this guy, about Donald Trump, and I think that a lot of that strangeness goes back to his parents basically abandoning him. They're dumping him in the military school, and then during the summers when he's home from school, his mother's over in Scotland playing debutante, and without Donald or any of the kids, his older brother drinking himself to death in his 50s. This is serious dysfunction. Michael, thanks for the call. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday in just a minute.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Coming up on 16 minutes past the hour here in the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Jeanette in Druryville, Virginia. Hey, Jeanette, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'm in Florida, but
Florida.
I want to talk. Yes.
Is it Druryville, Florida?
No, I'm in Haines City, Florida.
Okay, our database must be mangled. So anyhow, what's up, Jeanette?
Well, anyway, I watched at 9 o'clock. I watched Fox last night.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch that?
No, I
anyway.
don't have the ability to watch Fox any longer.
Oh my goodness! It was the guy on Fox with Trump all evening.
Mm-hmm.
It's too bad you didn't see it. So anyway, it's all about the war on drugs, and they're saying all the drugs are coming across the border and everything. And
right.
Well, we know different that it's coming in through the ports and through the planes and through the people.
Well, there was an interesting.
So anyway.
Oh, go ahead, Jeanette.
What?
Sorry. I was going to say there was an interesting article in one of the science magazines today. I read this morning before we went on the air, where they said that within a decade, there are going to be consumer-level drones that are capable of lifting a human being. Right now, you can buy a drone from Amazon that's capable of lifting a 5 or 10 pound package. But within 10 years, they figure that there will be drones that are capable of lifting a person 30 or 40 feet and then depositing them, 40, 50 feet away. In other words, pick somebody up, lift them over Trump's wall, and drop them back down on the other side. And, what are you going to do then? It's a 30-foot wall, a 35-foot ladder. This is crazy. Anyhow, back to you, Jeanette.
Anyway, the whole thing is, that's all. The war on drugs is a big money maker for the world's worst people.
Sure.
And they're anti-people. But Big Pharma is killing Middle America. And the opioid crisis has nothing to do with the Mexicans or illegals down at the border. That's all a different deal.
No, actually, most of the fentanyl coming into this country is coming from China through the U.S. mail.
Right. I just wanted to say that. I watched that last night, and they're showing that just big as day on there.
Yeah. Well, you have my sympathy, Jeanette. Thanks for putting yourself through that so you could report to us on it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Susie in Vaughan, Washington. Hey, Susie, what's on your mind today?
Hey, bless your heart. My brother saw that, said it was the worst movie he'd ever watched. He said it was just horrifying. Anyhow, yeah, I have a bumper sticker that I think the rubes might be able to understand, and it is the silhouette of the Earth, how it's been used 100 times for different things, and it says, when she goes, we go, ... 2040, and then underneath in little letters that those of us that have a brain read, when micro goes, macro follows.
Yeah, well said.
Booyah.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. No, Mother Earth is in big trouble right now, Susie.
It's huge. It's gross. I can't. Anyhow,
it's just what's astonishing to me is so many people don't understand that we're connected to the environment.
And that's why I say, and I'm in a prime area to do it, and I do it. I work for like thousands of people. I see them every day. I'm a cashier, blah, blah, blah. And when somebody says things anymore, and this is what I say to all of us out there, if they say black, you say, sorry, white. And I don't mean that, black and white.
No, I get what you mean.
Tell people you're wrong.
Yeah, talk back.
And
stand up.
I use that. I no longer will pander. I can't.
That's great. That's great. Good on you, Susie. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for listening to KBCS. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Fred in Los Angeles. Hey, Fred, what's up?
Yeah, hi. Happy New Year, first of all.
Thank you. Back at you, Fred. What's up? What's on your mind?
All right. Well, first of all, here's the joke. If rich men can't get into heaven, I think they're going to end up in limbo.
In limbo?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Here's what it seems to me might be the most obvious scenario with regards to Trump and impeachment.
Yeah.
You read the book several times where the Koch brothers reversed themselves about interfering in the markets when it started to affect them. Well,
Sure.
That's typical Republican, but...
Yeah, no, they're all in favor of their fossil fuel subsidies. They love that stuff.
Now, we also know that Trump is very vindictive. Would you honestly think that he would give any bank a bailout that would not bail him out?
Yeah, good point.
So if that's the case, and I think that you would have the Trump brothers and all their minions start to think about impeachment.
You mean the Koch
brothers? They want to bail out the banks to save their markets.
Yeah, you mean the Koch brothers, I assume, Fred.
Yes, that's what I meant.
So I guess the question is, will the billionaire oligarchs step up and to all this? It's a good question, and I don't know the answer, but it may be. I mean, we thought when they went for criminal justice reform that they were starting to back away from Trump. And then it turns out that the whole criminal justice reform thing was kind of a scam designed to make it harder to prosecute white-collar criminals, and it helped out about 2,500 drug dealers.
Because it's not like you can start any more wars. There are 8 wars going on now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the worst of the death at this point.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and many of those have states of emergency or other executive actions associated with them that give Trump more power. Fred, thank you for the call. Horace in High Point, North Carolina. Hey, Horace, what's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom?
Good.
What I wanted to know, if you know it, when Donald Trump's wife first came to this country, she had a visa where she worked, and it was illegal to work on that particular visa. Now, subsequently, she got a mom and dad here, and they became citizens, and he had some kind of model agency or something where he was bringing people over, and the visas that they were working on, it was illegal. Did you know anything about that?
Yeah, I believe Melania Knauss, I believe was her name, K-N-A-U-S-S. When she came over here, she came over on a tourist visa, and she was working as a model, and that was illegal. And they cleaned that up eventually, and then her parents, of course, came over, and they just became citizens a few months ago, maybe a year ago, and that was on the family reunification thing that Trump has been talking about. He calls it chain migration. In Trump's world, it's how dare brown people and black people bring their relatives over here? That you're expanding their population in the United States. Oh, Melania's parents? Yes, that's just fine. They're nice white people. I mean, I really think that that's what's going on, Horace.
Right. Okay. Now, can I ask you one other question quickly? Sure. Mitch McConnell, Cotton, there's another one. I forgot this guy that was running up to the White House saying that he knew that there was some kind of criminal activity going on, and they finally found out what he was doing. Now, why aren't the Democrats proceeding with great people to take them out of there?
How so? You mean electorally, the Democrats are?
Come up. Okay, but they don't target Mitch McConnell. They got to target him and get him out of there.
Mitch McConnell's up for re-election. In another 22 months, Mitch McConnell is standing for election. If he chooses to run again, now he's 70, he'll be 78 years old. He's 76 right now. He'll be 78 years old when that happens. And my personal opinion, particularly given that his wife is the heir to a multi-million, maybe even billion-dollar shipping fortune, I'm guessing that Mitch McConnell's probably going to retire. But who knows? I mean, it's hard to predict. Right. But he's one of those 22 senators who are up for re-election, and it's going to get dicey for them. Horace, thanks for the call. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Good. I was thinking about this, and I come across a couple of ideas that the only way this government will reopen is if there is a federal court order directing that, because we're all reminding each other that there was a unanimous deal prior to Christmas to keep this government running again, but the likes of Sean Hannity's, Rush Limbaugh, and Coulter's opened up their big mouth and triggered Trump to do a 180 and refuse to sign the bill, and now we have the government shutdown. And the thing is that if Mitch McConnell doesn't want to bring the votes forth, you can have 99% of these Republicans in the Senate joining forces with the House to reopen the government, and then Mitch McConnell's like, nope, we ain't bringing it forth because it doesn't have Trump's wall.
Well, that's pretty much what's going on right now.
Yeah. So the thing is that why can't the Senate, the senators, and even House of Representatives submit sworn affidavit saying we vote to reopen the government, but Mitch McConnell doesn't want to do that. And then the other aspect...
Well, hang on just a second. Michael, let me just real quickly answer that, because we just have 30 seconds, so we're hitting a break here. I don't believe that there is any power that the federal judiciary has to compel the Senate to do their work. I don't see the basis for a lawsuit.
There was just a thought that crossed my mind. I mean, something's got to give.
No, it's a great idea, Michael, and I think that there's probably going to be a lot of lawsuits that come out of this, but they're going to be more, specific harms that were the consequence of the president, playing politics with people's lives. But I just don't see where, and I don't recall any example in history, and I just finished writing a book about the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ever directed Congress to do anything. They're co-equal branches. Michael, thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
28 minutes past the hour, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's Thom Hartmann here with you. Anything Goes Friday. Back with your calls right after this. Today from Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America by Martha S. Jones. In the introduction, Rights of Colored Men Debating Citizenship in Antebellum America is the title of the introduction. The title of William Yates's 1838 treatise, Rights of Colored Men, aptly captures the subject of this book. The 19th century Americans for whom Yates wrote were fascinated by a juridical puzzle. Not slaves, nor aliens, nor the equals of free white men, who were former slaves and their descendants before the law. None were more interested in this question than black Americans themselves, and Birthright Citizens takes up their point of view to tell the history of race and rights in the antebellum United States. The pressures brought on by so-called black laws and colonization schemes, especially a radical strain, explain why free people of color feared their forced removal from the United States. In response, they claimed an unassailable belonging, one grounded in birthright citizenship. No legal text expressly provided for such, but their ideas anticipated the terms of the 14th Amendment. Set in Baltimore, a place between North, South, and the Atlantic world, this book traces the scenes and the debates through which black Americans developed ideas about citizenship and claims to the rights that citizens enjoyed. Along the way, they engaged with legislators, judges, and law's everyday administrators. From the local courthouse to the chambers of high courts, the rights of colored men came to define citizenship for the nation as a whole. Yates authored the very first legal treatise on the rights of free black Americans. It was 1838 when Rights of Colored Men to Suffrage, Citizenship, and Trial by Jury was published in Philadelphia. He was not one of antebellum America's highly regarded legal minds. Some say he read law for a time, although there's no evidence that he was admitted to the bar. Instead, Yates's career began with a short-lived stint as a newspaper publisher in his hometown of Troy, New York. His bona fides on the subject of race and citizenship were best established during his years as an agent for the American Anti-Slavery Society. While many abolitionists maintained a self-conscious distance from free black communities, Yates centered his work there. The opposition of free people, the oppression of free people of color was a companion to slavery in Yates's view, with anti-slavery work necessarily extending into questions of free people's status. Penning Rights of Colored Men was the pinnacle of this mission. Yates placed a powerful instrument of authority in the hands of free African Americans and their allies. The antebellum legal treatise was a key tool in the standardization and dissemination of legal knowledge and was typically devoted to the comprehensive synthesis of a single branch of law. By the late 1830s, Yates was following on the success of James Kent's commentaries and Joseph Story's treatise series. The genre had come to be associated with the concepts of law, as scientific knowledge, legal education as systemic, and the profession as respectable. Yates successfully adopted legal culture's own tool to such a degree that readers from the 19th century until today have regarded him as an authority on free black legal status. But Yates's text was also a work of advocacy. Rights of Colored Men received prominent notices in the black and abolitionist press and could be purchased at local anti-slavery society offices. As a result, the work served as a probing legal treatise that fueled activist arguments. Yates provides a window into the position that some activists, black and white, took on race and citizenship in the end of the 1830s. Law was an instrument of change, and Yates forthrightly explained his objective: to undermine prejudice against color. Racism had led to legal disability, exclusion from militia service, naturalization, suffrage, public schooling, ownership of real property, office holding, and courtroom testimony. Yates was especially unsettled by the disenfranchisement of free black men in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and more recently Pennsylvania. Assembling evidence from legal culture, he believed, would help establish the rights and citizenship of free black people. Yates began with a story of the nation's origin. The establishment of the United States, he said, had been at the outset a revolutionary, Republican, and an enlightened undertaking that was untainted by racism or distinctions among and between races. This had been possible in the wake of the American Revolution because the founding generation knew firsthand the contributions black people had made to independence through military service and through labor. American law had originally been colorblind, as evidenced by the absence of racial distinctions in founding documents such as the federal and state constitutions. Change came in the early 19th century at the fault line between generations. A forgetting occurred, Yates posited. Lawmakers of the early republic did not know how black people had contributed to the nation's founding and hence were entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens. In this sense, Yates's aim was partly to restore that past to the nation's political and legal memory. To achieve this, he compiled a history of lawmakers and their deliberations, in which he found the development of anti-black prejudice in courts, constitutional conventions, and legislatures. He followed the professional lives of men whose work included roles from low-level administrator to convention delegate and judge. Their ideas about free black people moved with them. Most powerful was Yates's argument about how law, through suffering from amnesia, could be made right. The book, Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it's Anything Goes Friday. Phil in Sun City, Arizona. Hey, Phil, what's on your mind today?
Bill.
Oh,
Hi,
Bill,
Tom.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What's up?
Tom, I want to talk to you about hemp, specifically hempcrete, a building material. Are you aware that an 18-inch wide hempcrete block has a insulation, heating and cooling R value of 41?
Wow. That's substantial. No, I wasn't aware of that, but you know, how does that compare with other vegetable matter? I mean, is hemp unique in this, or would that be true of straw as well? I know people were building houses out of straw bales for a while there.
Straw and hempcrete, when you add lime to it, it tends to petrify. It turns into stone over time, and it absorbs and lets go of water readily.
Right.
You could heat your house passively and cool it passively. In the most northern and southern climes, you could heat it and cool it with minimal energy.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we started refitting our homes with hempcrete, something that grows? I mean, could you imagine growing your home?
Yeah, there's three parts to completely changing the way that we use energy in the United States. The first is to stop all the subsidies to fossil fuels. It's about $300 billion a year that we are transferring to the Koch brothers, you know, Koch Industries and ExxonMobil and BP and all these other companies, the coal companies, the natural gas companies, the frackers, all this stuff. So stop those. The second is to change the systems that we have for the use of energy, and that's what you're speaking to, Bill. In other words, hyper-insulate our houses and those kinds of things. So it takes less energy, so we're using less energy. Move our,
something readily available.
Right, exactly. Make our cars more fuel efficient. The thing that Trump just blew up, Obama's fuel efficiency standards. And then the third is to start actually nurturing these alternative energy sources. Take that $300 billion. If we took that $300 billion a year in subsidies that we're giving to the fossil fuel industry right now, and instead they gave that to wind, solar, biomass, tidal energy, things like that. Yeah, I think that within 10 years we could completely change the energy profile of the United States. Germany did it in about 6 years with residential electricity, and
the beauty of the hemp plant. The beauty of the hemp plant is that the byproducts that come with it. But you take out one part of the plant for the hempcrete, and you still have the oil. You still have the fiber. You still have the plant just keeps on giving.
Yeah, no, the hemp is an extraordinarily efficient converter of sunlight into biomass. Phil, thanks for the call. Well said. Jim in Los Angeles. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Professor Hartmann, still the smartest man in all media.
Yeah.
And, we must not focus so much on Trump, but Trump Republicans. All Republicans are now Trump Republicans. He's the leader of the Republican Party.
Trumplicans?
Trump Republicans, yes. He's the leader of the Republican Party. So since they won't stand up against him, they must be branded by him, and we all know he's a criminal. But you have the smartest listeners, and one who was heartfelt in saying the reason Pelosi should capitulate on this border wall is because the Emergency Powers Act, is that what it's called, Tom?
I'm not sure where you're going with it, Jim.
To stop Trump from calling the Emergency Powers Act to build his wall, capitulate and give them 2.5 billion, give them another billion, negotiate and try to stop him from taking ungodly powers that could, it could destroy this country. It could destroy the Constitution if he does that. It's a scary thing, Tom. And
I agree, Jim, on the one hand. On the other hand, this is what FDR was accused of doing back with the New Deal. The Republicans were saying, "Oh, you're doing things that are unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that Social Security should happen. It's a violation of the Constitution to do that. Unemployment insurance is unconstitutional." And the Supreme Court actually backed up these Republicans. I mean, they struck down long-term unemployment back in 1935. They struck down the Industrial Recovery Act, the IRA rather, which included long-term unemployment. It included union protections. It included a form of support for health care. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that was in there, and the Supreme Court took it down. So I'm not sure that it's the end of the republic, Jim. And if the next president who comes along is a Democrat and they say, okay, Trump successfully declared a state of emergency and took money to build the wall. We have a real emergency with the climate. We're going to declare that an emergency. We have a real emergency with 40,000 Americans, I guess it's 24,000 now, dying from lack of health care. So we're gonna cover everybody in the country with Medicare. That's a real emergency.
I know, but please let me finish. If Trump can claim a victory and Nancy goes in and renegotiates only on the reason that Trump doesn't get to call an Emergency Powers Act, if that's the only reason, please do it. Please go ahead and give him one more billion, $2.6 billion for his wall.
See, I disagree, Jim. I think that if you give Donald Trump what he wants, particularly when he's asking in a way that is obviously just show. This is a stunt. This was the speech that he gave Tuesday night was the kickoff of his 2020 campaign, and he was clear about that. He's running ads about it. He's sending out emails about it. I've read some of them here on the air. No, Jim, I'm telling you, this is it. Jim, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Bill in Warrenton, Missouri. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, what I'm worried about with this, if he gets away with calling the border a national emergency,
right.
Next election, he'll find an emergency to postpone the election.
It's not inconceivable, Bill. It's not inconceivable. And the fact that he wants to put William Barr in as Attorney General, who back when George Herbert Walker Bush was president, and the special counsel at that time, Lawrence Walsh, as I recall was his name, he had just subpoenaed President Bush's diaries from the Iran-Contra affair, and they were going to prosecute George Herbert Walker Bush, who was sitting president in the White House. And his Attorney General, William Barr, said, okay, here's how you stop the special counsel investigation. Pardon everyone that he's investigating. And that's exactly what Bush did. He pardoned Casper Weinberger and he pardoned 5 other people, bang, just like that. It would be the same thing as if Trump pardoned Michael Cohen, Paul Manafort, Papadopoulos, the whole crew, right? The 6 or 8 of them that are facing serious charges. If he just pardoned all of them, that guy who did that for George H.W. Bush and got him out of. And that guy, Lawrence Walsh, the prosecutor, said on one of the Sunday shows, I think it was Face the Nation, he said that the president of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, was engaged in a cover-up. He was covering up the whole Iran-Contra thing because he was involved in it. And that guy is the guy that Trump is going to have installed as Attorney General next week.
Yeah, that's not good either. One other thing, if I can say, if he does manage to still be president for the next election, I think he's going to dump Pence and make Nikki Haley his vice presidential nominee, with the agreement that if they win, when she runs, she names Donald Trump Jr. as her vice president.
Well, I don't know about that last part, but I would say with the agreement that when she runs, the first thing she'll do if she becomes president is to pardon him and his family and everybody else. I think that's an entirely viable possibility, Bill.
Because I think he's going to think he needs a woman to let him have a chance.
And a woman of color at that. And particularly if Kamala Harris is the Democratic candidate, for president or vice president, it's going to be That's the kind of thing that would be very, very strategic. Bill, thanks for the call. George in Chicago. Hey, George, what's on your mind?
Well, let me just say initially I couldn't be in more disagreement with the earlier caller, Jim. There's no point in having power if you're not going to use it. And the Democrats want a substantial victory in the House and have the majority of the people behind them to back them up. So a line should be drawn in the sand for this mentally ill clown that's occupying the White House and say, that's it, no more.
Well, it's already been drawn. It's been drawn by both Pelosi and Schumer. The question is, how long can they hang on? And I suspect it's a long time. And then the question becomes, how long can 800,000 government employees hang on? And that's not such a long time. But back to you, George.
Well, I hope everybody who's in uniform understands how much contempt he has for them, because the members of the Coast Guard, who are the front line of our defense against terrorism, are being told, well, they were being told until it was pulled off the website, that they should have rummage sales, yard sales, and garage sales to tide them over until they get paid again.
I remember.
But anyway, what I called about was in 2017, this is an example of who the Republicans are. They comfort the billionaires and afflict the rest of us. They passed a law, it was called the 2017 Farm Act, that stripped the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, which is the union for the farm workers, of their ability to negotiate and to work for fair pay and safe working conditions. Now, this is an outrage to begin with. These are the people that harvest the food that we all eat, and they're very poorly paid to begin with. Right. And the Southern Poverty Law Center went into court, and after a certain amount of legal battling, was able to get an injunction to suspend the act and keep it from going into effect until it works its way through the federal courts, which, as far as I know, there still hasn't been a final decision.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the difference between the Republicans and the rest of us. It's like you've told us that Trump does not care about people who didn't vote for him, doesn't care how much pain he causes, doesn't care if he bankrupts people, doesn't care if people die. But a lot of these lawmakers in the Republican North Carolina legislature were owners of large corporate farms themselves, passing a new law that benefited them personally. I mean, that is beyond outrageous, to use the legislature to put money in your pocket.
Yeah.
And they just go ahead and do it.
I agree.
And you have an organization like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is not wealthy and not well funded, but they know how to go into court and fight effectively. But with the way they're packing the courts, how much longer will it be that the courts will be available as a resort to these kind of cases?
Yeah, this is getting very, very problematic. And Trump has gotten through, 28 judges now? After, Barack Obama in the last 2 years got 3, as I recall. Very, very few. George, spot on. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. It's 46.5 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Right back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Stick around. Thank you, Sean. And welcome back. Sean in North Platte, Nebraska. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Hey, I guess I was thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Reaganomics, and I think we're getting it on steroids with Trump, is like the damage they did to public education, and has. I guess I was hearing a lot of rant this weekend about people not pulling over for a funeral. Not pulling over for a funeral, or my mind is totally.
That's okay. I know what you mean. So trickle down. Part of while you're trying to catch that thought, let me just say real quickly, Reaganomics has a couple of pieces to it. One piece is the trickle down theory, the horses and sparrows economics. That the more you feed the rich people, the more they will pass that little bit of that money on to everybody else, which has been completely discredited. It was discredited in the 1880s when they rolled it out. It was discredited in the 1980s again. Another part of it is doing away with the protections that working people have. That is specifically the right to unionize. And then the third part of it is deregulating the marketplace more broadly so that people don't have more general protections like unemployment insurance, health and safety rules, welfare rules, things like that. And that over time, more and more benefits will go away, so employees become more and more frightened, and basically you turn the entire country from a nation of workers, two-thirds of people in the workforce in 1980 when Reagan came into office had the equivalent of a good union job, to right now where it's about 12% of the workforce.
You'll see it get even worse under Trump, too.
Yep, absolutely.
You'll see it get 10 times worse under Trump, and it started back during the Reagan era. Where people don't they take it out of public. They take our like they're taking our civics out of public education because of Reaganomics, and so people aren't learning what they're supposed to be learning, and they don't have as much. And like this Betsy DeVos and the Trump administration that wants to go after public education.
And this is a twofer for them, Sean, because when Betsy DeVos succeeds in privatizing schools like she did in large parts of Michigan, number one, you've got some oligarch like, Betsy DeVos who can make a whole lot of money on that, and a bunch of smaller businesses that can make money on it. And number two, you end up with stupider students. You dumb down the public.
That's where I was going.
And they're much more likely to go along with the Republican BS if they've been dumbed down. They don't know, they don't even know the history of FDR, for example.
That was my whole point, was they're trying to dumb down our students. And you hear conservatives, that people who sound like conservatives talk about manners and the right way of bringing up our kids. And yet I think Reaganomics and Trump's like it on steroids, where kids and younger people and even some adults don't have manners. Well, it's because of the attack on our public education system. From Reaganomics that has done it.
Yeah, spot on, Sean. We used to have a really good, well-functioning school system. Now, not so much. I mean, in wealthy neighborhoods, because it's still funded by the property tax, which was put in there in the beginning to keep poor communities having crappy schools and rich communities having good schools. We'll be back with more Anything Goes Friday in just a moment. Hey, if you're one of our Patreon sponsors or YouTube sponsors, be sure to check out the new video that's available talking about our poopy president. No, I don't mean that in a bizarre or even sarcastic way. It turns out that the number of people who are now hospitalized, many of them are going to need kidney transplants all around the United States. I mean, literally, their lives have been devastated and wiped out, is the result of a decision that Donald Trump made to tell his EPA to allow more cow poop, basically, to be intentionally or unintentionally used for irrigation of crops, specifically romaine lettuce. And thus, you are getting poisoned because he wants deregulation. Isn't that cool? Check out the video. It's coming up for all of our Patreon and YouTube sponsors. And thanks so much for supporting the program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thank you for supporting our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Joe in Pompano Beach, Florida. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Oh, not much. I listen to your show, and I'm not your typical person that calls in that much. I called in on other nights. Anyway, long story short, I listen to you and other people call in. I listen to these spin lawyers, whether you like Trump or don't like Trump. And I always thought, you're tried in a court of law, not in public, the way these people are. I don't know if the president's going to be charged or convicted of anything. Looking at people talking about pardon him, like you've had a couple of callers ago. I just don't understand how, if I was an attorney or I need an attorney, I want one that's going to defend me completely, not tell me you don't have a chance, Joe, but let's do this. I mean, you get a lot of people in there. The presumption of innocence is gone right now in our country. It seems like everybody's guilty and they didn't do anything, at least been convicted or charged.
Joe, I don't understand the point you're trying to make. It sounds like you're.
The point is,
go ahead.
What? Okay, it's a simple point. Aren't we innocent until proven guilty for anything we do wrong?
Not in the political world.
Not a problem.
Not in politics. In politics, you've got to prove your chops. In court, yeah, of course, you're innocent until proven guilty, and that's why you've got a prosecutor who is compiling evidence of Trump's guilt, and he has already indicted 34
people. We don't know
people.
if he's guilty or not. We don't know guilt.
No, we don't. You're right.
He's guilty.
We do know, I think with a relatively high level of certainty, that Trump actually did pay off 2 women that he was having affairs with, that he did it just before the election, and he did it because he knew if it got into the election, he would not be in the White House right now. If that is true, and I think that, Joe, even you as a Trump supporter will agree with me that probably 99% true. If that is true, that means that Trump took the White House by fraud. And by crime. It's a crime to do that.
We don't know that.
Well,
I don't know that. I don't know that. You don't know it either.
What I know is that I've heard audio tape of Donald Trump directing Michael Cohen to make the payments. We have heard from both the women that they have received the payments. We have heard from the lawyer for Michael Cohen that Michael Cohen was the guy who made the payments. That Michael Cohen in 3 weeks is going to testify before Congress to this effect. I mean, that's just one of many things. We know that Trump is continuing to take money from the Saudis laundered through his hotels, for example, in violation of the Constitution and in violation of the law. We know that the lease that Trump signed with the city of Washington, D.C. and the federal government, which owns the old post office building, which is now the Trump International Hotel, that lease explicitly says that no elected official may hold a lease with the federal government for federal property like that. And Trump continues to do that. He's in violation of his lease. He's in violation of the Emoluments Clause. These are not speculative, Joe. These are things that we know. And I guarantee you, if Barack Obama had done even 1% of just those 3 things I mentioned, he would have been impeached.
Okay. Well, how about our healthcare system that my girlfriend she was paying $254 a month, never had an illness. She's 56 years old, right? And it went up to $800-some a month because of the Obama health care. She couldn't keep her doctor. All the conversations that you heard and I heard during the whole campaign for health care. Now, that to me, there's something wrong there as well. Okay?
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree. We need to fix our
Obama
health care system. Let's go to a single-payer system. It'll save us $1 trillion a year. Joe, I got to move along here. James in St. Petersburg, Florida. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Happy New Year, Tom. How are you?
I'm great. Happy New Year to you, James. What's on your mind?
Good. Well, I have a question for you, but I just want to make a couple comments real quick because I know we're almost out of time. I think they ought to take that Trump tape where he says that Schumer is not responsible for shutting down the government and replay it about every hour on all the major channels. A point about civility, it requires empathy, and empathy is learned behavior, and I don't want to get into that anymore. But what I really called you about is, when did the U.S. allow non-U.S. citizens to own U.S. airwaves, i.e. Rupert Murdoch? I give it to you, and I'll hand
Well, he's a U.S. citizen now, A, and B, Fox News is not over the air. It's on cable. But I get your point, and I think that there needs to be some real changes in our media landscape. I have articles up on Alternet, Truth Out, and Alternet, Truth Dig, and Common Dreams right now, specifically about the media, the 4 reasons why the media won't tell you the truth about what's going on. You may find it useful, James. James, thanks a lot for the call. Thank you all for being with us today. It's been a fascinating day. I hope you have a wonderful and peaceful weekend. Try to disconnect yourself a little, huh? It's like a healthy thing. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your